Seat where you want to sit so we can get started, so we can stay on schedule. I thought the ground rules were nobody can stay standing unless they're working a table. My name is Jerry Allen. I do the short straw to start the program off. We'll start with the prayer, Reverend Larry Carell. Last night, when we gathered together with the speakers and were getting ready to do this, was reminded from Mark Gurley some words from the President Lincoln during the Civil War. He made a proclamation which was signed on April 30th that year. I want to just share part of it because it fits right in with what I wanted to share with you for prayer. Quoting, "We have been the recipients of the choicest bounties of heaven. We have been preserved these many years in peace and prosperity. We have grown in numbers, wealth, and power, as no other nation has ever grown. But we have forgotten God. We have forgotten the gracious hand which preserved us in peace and multiplied and enriched and strengthened us, and we have vainly imagined in the deceitfulness of our heart that all those blessings were produced by some superior wisdom and virtue of our own. Intoxicated, we think we can do it ourselves." Will you join me in prayer? Gracious Father, Lord of all, we're thankful that we can gather with your children, our fellow saints and citizens. You have provided generously for us this day, this place, our organizers, our presenters, our guests, the sustenance that we'll have to eat, and our shelter. We are truly blessed and grateful to live in a land that acknowledges life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You have promised everything necessary in nature to provide a life of liberty and fullness. It is only when we notice the conditions of the world that we live in that we become alarmed. Our trials and tribulations loom large and foreboding. Who are we few in the face of so many troubles? Looking back in history, we see the price that has been paid time after time for liberty by so few of us. We're always tempted to seek a larger number of fellow travelers to ensure our ultimate victory over the forces of evil, trusting in our own strength and wisdom. Help us to learn to rely upon you, your plan and provision. We must admit our total dependence upon you. Remind us daily the lessons learned by your people throughout history. Bring to mind the lessons of Gideon's army so that we value relying totally upon you. Gideon was delighted to have 32,000 arrive for battle. That meant they were only outnumbered by maybe 4 Midianites to 1 Jewish soldier. However, you wanted fighters without fear, so 22,000 were sent home. And then you wanted only those who would give you the glory, and so you tested their readiness, and only 300 were found totally vigilant. This godly group, now reduced to less than 1% of their original size, followed your commander and prevailed. They were only outnumbered, maybe 450 to 1. They prevailed in your strength, not their own. So may we watch and study to be vigilant to answer your call in defense of our land, that we might live peaceably with all mankind. Encourage us, enable us to stand and be counted amongst those trusting fully upon you. When righteousness is restored, we will be pleased to give you the glory. In Jesus' name, amen.
Can you rise with me and for the Pledge of Allegiance? Big flag on the wall. allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Amen.
Okay, now we're going to have Michael Carluccio, who was a performer last night at the VIP affair, do a couple of patriotic songs. Michael? Where's Michael? Where? Over there. Okay. We threw him a curve as to where the laptop is going to be, so he'll be right in a minute. After that, we'll have Norm Hughes will come up and talk about the movement, and we'll plan to get started about 9:30 with William Wagner. All of you should have the schedule of what's going on and who's taking lead at various events throughout the day. Go ahead.
We've had a couple program changes this morning. Mary Sears and her husband Tim were coming from Houghton, and Houghton is as far from here as Washington D.C. is in many ways, but unfortunately they had to turn back. They had a family crisis, and similar things that happened with Larry Rocca, who is the treasurer of Macomb County. Should never have been the treasurer. Only he and Candace Miller were the only two Republicans elected countywide in Macomb County in decades. And it was because of the Reagan Revolution, there was Reagan Democrats coming back, getting into it, huge turnout for Trump in Macomb County, a 16% swing in one election, and we elected some countywide people there. And I was hoping to have Larry tell you how they did that. So what we're going to do in that period of time is we're going to actually take a minute or two and get to know each of the sponsors and why they're here, the tables. There's a couple that haven't set up yet, 3 as a matter of fact. But we thought that would be a good way for you to understand that. If I can talk them into it, we might take a minute or two and have Dwayne Zantop tell us how they toppled the government in Plymouth Township. There's a lot of victories going on for the conservative movement. It's just awesome what's happening. And I want you to understand how a few people can make a difference. The one of 450. So, are you ready, Michael? Michael is a member of MCU, by the way. He does Las Vegas type acts and channels so many great people, and he's a phenomenal singer. You'll hear.
Thank you. It's good to be here, and when I do this, the song that I'd like to do is "God Bless the USA" by Mr. Lee Greenwood, and I guess most of you know that song or familiar with it. What I like to do is, how many veterans do we have in the audience? Could we ask you to just stand up for a minute and stand over there, please? And would everybody else please stand and join with me in saluting these great men? Please sing along if you know the words. From the lakes of Minnesota to the hills of Tennessee, across the plains of Texas, from sea to shining sea, from Detroit down to Houston and New York to LA, there's pride in every American's heart, and they can't take that away. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I'm proudly stand up next to you and defend the today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. tomorrow, all the things were gone I'd worked for all my life, and I had to start all over with just my children and my wife. I thank my lucky stars for living here today, 'cause the flag still stands for freedom, and they can't take that away. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the man who died, he gave that right to me. So I proudly stand up next to you and defend the still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. Proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died and gave that right to me. So we proudly stand up next to you and defend us still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt this land, God bless the I don't know of any better song than that other than the national anthem. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
If you will, please take out your program books. We're going to go through those real briefly and tell you what our goals are today. Back in 2009, a miracle happened on April 15th, where on thousands of courtyards across this country, protesters, Tea Party people, rose up and said they're not going to take it anymore. And it inspired some of us who've been involved for a lot of years. Michigan Conservative Union was actually formed in 1975, and but it atrophied over a period of time. This movement tends to have swing in peaks and valleys, and of course, when we got Reagan elected and MCU carried that campaign in Michigan, one of our first victories. 78, we passed tax limitation amendment, put it in the U.S. in the Michigan Constitution. Through the years, we've had some phenomenal successes, but when Reagan got elected, everybody said we won. We can go home now. We can quit working. You know, he'll take care of it for us. And what happened with MCU is I myself and others joined the Reagan administration and senior policy positions and so on, helped change the dynamics in America considerably. But there was nobody back here to keep the movement going. And so the next vice president became the president, and he was a state senator from Holland, and then a professor from a couple of colleges took afterward, and eventually it slowed down, and by 2009 it was pretty much dead. And then the Tea Party thing happened, and some of us who were involved with the Reagan operations and some got together with some of the Tea Party leaders and some of the conservative groups around the state and decided to take one last try at rebuilding the conservative movement in Michigan. On March 26th, in 2011, we had our first MiCPAC conference. We only had 90 registered the night before, and we were sweating it, but 375 people showed up. We had to bring in additional tables and send out for more food, and it was great. But we had 8 task force we formed at that. And those task force developed a number of tools. We passed a number of educational bills from our education task force, teacher tenure reform, stopping public school districts from collecting union dues and PAC money, and just bill after bill after bill, which was helping condition and puppy train, I call it, legislators and the governor to get used to liking our stuff and signing off on it and building credibility. We then went into the Republican State Convention in 2012, and we cleaned their clocks. We threw out the national committee man and national committee woman, put in our people. We ran all 8 state education post, put our people in, including defeating an incumbent member on the State Board of Education. And the conservative movement was flexing its muscle because we were trying to pass freedom to work. The Right to Work Task Force formed at the CPAC in 1911. We invited 22 people to show up, and 46 did, including several legislators to get it started. And it grew to a task force of 218 groups with over 70,000 members and 20,000 businesses. The big boys, the money people, said, well, don't push it now, wait till the last year of the governor's term or something, we might be able to get him to do it. We said, we're not going to wait. We got a narrow window of opportunity. Michigan had lost 820,000 jobs. We were reeling. Our families were moving out of town. Mayflower was reporting that people were leaving in droves, leaving the state because of the poor economy here. So we saw this. 83,000 union members lost their jobs in 2010. So we had all this plus the statistics of how much better a right-to-work state is. Keynoting that first conference was Tom Hawkins, the labor force commissioner in Texas, that had gained 800,000 jobs while we were losing 820,000. So we wanted him to explain how they were doing it. The next conference, we brought in the senator from Yoder from Indiana, who was leading the fight there. We helped them then pass right to work there, thinking we got Walker to do it for public sector. He hadn't done it for private sector yet. And we got then Indiana. That was additional pressure to be able to pass it here in Michigan. Nobody said Michigan would ever pass right to work. And for 40 years, I've been involved in trying to make it happen, but they were always sucking money from us to send to other states to be able to happen. And they it wasn't going to happen here. But by God, we did it. And we were relentless. We wouldn't stop. And that's the kind of thing that's going to be necessary to straighten this state out. It just continually is deteriorating because we got a cabal going now where we got 8 liberal Republican senators that get together with the 12 Democrat senators, and it becomes a majority. And so, the 2/3 of the Republican caucus is conservative and trying to do the right thing, but they don't have the numbers because the 8 liberals aligned with the governor cross over with the Democrats. So that's what's happening in this state. We got majorities. 2010, what the Tea Party did, sweeping all the offices in Michigan, putting people on boards of education, the governor, the attorney general, the secretary of state. And we thought, the courts, we took the solid majority on the Michigan Supreme Court. And so we thought finally we're going to have a conservative government here. But big money is a terrible influence. The last night when they passed Medicaid expansion after we defeated it 5 times, I was the lone soldier there at 3 o'clock in the morning when there were, I counted them, 80 people, lobbyists, the nurses, the doctors, the osteopaths, the insurance industry, every special interest that was going to carve up $2.2 billion of our tax dollars every year for Medicaid expansion. It was a terrible influence to see. And the big thing that's holding back the conservative movement now from governance is the fact that we do not have that financial base yet. And so, if any of you guys have some ideas on how we can develop that relationship, if we just had one executive director to go up against, if you go out and see the MEA building out here on Saginaw Street, go out further on Saginaw Farm Bureau, all these Taj Mahals they have, the Michigan Municipal League, Townships Association, Prosecutors Associations, all of them have buildings and staff fighting for their special interests, and we the people limp up here a couple times a year to talk to our legislators. We can't compete that way. We're doing a phenomenal job of what we got to work with, but we've got to build this movement so that we can go further. Today, I wanted to, in this program, prepare you to understand what we need to do, give you a blueprint on how we might be able to get there. 2 years ago, we had a campaign toolkit, we called it, a seminar for campaigns. 80 people showed up, 55 of them ran for office, 48 of them got elected. A phenomenal record. We developed our own strategy group because the 4 or 5 campaign strategists in the state are so convoluted with special interest and big money that good, solid conservative candidates don't have anybody do their polling, help them with their literature, develop their strategies, and so on. So we set up a group called Unique Strategies. It's run, frankly, by my wife, who is assistant to Dick Wirthlin, who is Ronald Reagan's pollster and top political strategist. He also is strategist for the White House and for the RNC. And Unique Strategies have an 85% victory record right now. So we're prepared. The tools are there. If you go in the program book and flip to page 7, please. And the tools we've developed within CU to help get the job done. First one is Project Kirk. Russell Kirk was from Michigan, more famous out of Michigan than he is anywhere else. I mean, and outside of Michigan, you got to be 80 miles away to be an expert, they say. Wrote the book, The Conservative Mind. It's his doctoral thesis. It became the blueprint and the heart and soul of the modern conservative movement. He's called, outside of Michigan, the father of the modern conservative movement. And it was his book that inspired Barry Goldwater and Ronald Reagan and William F. Buckley Jr. and others to be able to pick up the torch and have a clear understanding. You see, if we have a different size measuring stick to gauge the truth and who we should be backing and what proposals we should be following, we can't get the job done. If your definition of conservative is different than mine, and I say conservative and you say conservative, we have different ideas on what it means. So when you get people like Bill Schuette and calling himself a conservative, you want to take a step back. So Project Kirk is putting out periodic lessons. Annette Kirk is an advisor to us, a good friend. We had our annual board meeting there at their house this last year. And we have Kirk Scholars. I'm a Kirk Scholar, Jim Persons, Harry Greiser. There's several of us in the state that are periodically writing missiles, dusting off some of Kirk's most wise sayings, and putting it out there on the street so that people understand what's going on. We have a newsletter called Conservative Choices newsletter. Goes out every 7 to 10 days. This week we put out 2 of them. And it goes to 26,000 people across the state. It's got an opening rate 50% higher than the typical newsletter. It's got a lot of clout. When I see it, some of these statewide elected officials are opening it within 10 minutes of it hitting the street, even at 3 o'clock in the morning. It's just amazing to watch. So we can track who's opening it and what they're clicking on, what they're interested in, so we can help tailor and speak and understand better how to reach for the conservative movement. It's a great tool. And Project Kirk is always featured in our newsletters. And what that's intended to do is we hope you will take those and send them out to your groups. Bounce it out. Take that out of the newsletter. Clip it and use it somewhere else if you can, to be able to try to use that measuring stick in such a way where everybody understands what conservative really means. Conservative does not mean a fuel tax increase, Conservative does not mean just blowing out the budget like they're doing, increasing taxes like they are, and increasing the regulations like they are. My wife is a notary. Michael Weber got elected as a conservative state representative in Rochester Hills. He's got just put in a bill to increase the licensing requirements for notaries and having them take additional schooling and pay higher fees. It's just one of the many, it takes 2,000 hours to get your license to cut hair in Michigan. It's just nuts. The free enterprise system is not being practiced. Capitalism is not being practiced in Michigan, even among a solid conservative majority. So Project Kirk is important. Operation Watchdog is alerting you on key bills and votes that are coming up, encouraging people to go to the legislature and so on. It's a very effective tool. We heard last night from Judy Emmons, a state senator who's going to run for Secretary of State, and she was talking about how communicating with legislators is important. Now, I know FACL and other training systems think you do it by beating them over the head, and they want to use that approach on freedom to work, and I said, no, there might be 1 or 2 we have to bludgeon at the end, but if you beat them over the head to get it through one time, you'll never have them again. And so you want to develop a relationship so they start being fed and understanding that they can stand up to the lobbyists and we the people will be at their backs. Project Friedman said the important thing is to establish a political climate of opinion which will make it politically profitable for the wrong people to do the right thing. You know, it's very difficult to stand up to lobbyists. Michael Coleman, one of the state representatives, took over $4,000 in lunches last year. Head of the Health Policy Committee. 2/3 of those were by Blue Cross Blue Shield. Now you think $4,000, if it was $100 a lunch, that's 400 lunches he had. And, you know, did he have 400 lunches as constituents? You know, we've got to continue to write letters, to talk to these people, and we got to talk to our neighbors and our family. You know, when you look at it, and you know, half of your family voted for Obama twice, maybe more than half. John Gibbs will be talking later today about he's the only conservative in his entire family, the only Republican in his entire family. It's our responsibility to educate and train people up, our kids, our friends, and so on. So those are important tools. As you go through the program, we set it up so you're going to hear from some local officials who have been successful and making a big difference. And I want you to listen to the lessons because you might be the candidate next time we need to be backing. We need to be able to get more good people into politics. We have a great session coming up on regulations, a report that's going to be delivered on that, a speaker from Tennessee on that. And in the afternoon, we're going to get into security issues. We're going to speak to several legislators, health solutions, education. It's a packed day. There's a lot of information. But when it all comes and goes, I hope you can take a few things away that will make you want to be reinvigorated and work harder to make things happen. And with that, I'm going to introduce William Wagner. You want to come up? And William is a former federal judge, federal prosecutor. He ran the appellate division in the Reagan administration in the Justice Department, and he's been a professor of law and a great evangelist. And so we thought he should come and give us some ideas on how we as legislators, elected officials, and even we the people, as the people behind them, can remain true in the face of all of the pressures we're going to face. You ready? All right.
Thank you.
Professor William Wagner.
Good morning. Norm, thank you. This is one of my heroes. This is a man who understands the good in good governance under the rule of law. And I thank him and this wonderful organization, Michigan's Conservative Union, that is one of the few places, I think, left willing to speak truth. As the Republican Party, for example, struggles to figure out what it means to Republican, he's asking even a bigger question. What does it mean to be conservative? Because a lot of people are coming around and telling you, I'm conservative, vote for me. Some of these people will even go into a pro-life rally. I've seen the same person go into a pro-life rally and say, we need to get rid of Roe versus Wade because I'm conservative. And then a few hours later get up and say, you know, the Supreme Court has spoken on same-sex marriage, so, you know, we've just got to accept it because it is the law of the land. Well, what we're going to talk about in the next little bit in the time that I have here is what is the difference between right and wrong, good and bad, just and unjust. How does it fit into a framework where those who govern can have a basis from which they govern, as opposed to making it up as they go along and implementing a social engineering agenda, and if they can't do it through perhaps the politically accountable branches of government, well, let's go find a few lawyers wearing robes that have ink in their pen and do it for us, because maybe that's more expedient. I called the talk this morning, Navigating to the City on the Hill. Can we get there? Or are we on a course to go over the Gomorrhean precipice instead? Are we heading over a cliff instead? I think we need to make those choices, you know, very soon. If you look at some earlier dictionaries in our country that actually define terms in the way that they actually mean, we look at Webster's dictionary defining politics. That part of ethics, which consists in the regulation and government of a nation or state, the preservation of its safety, peace, and prosperity. I did have a clicker here somewhere. There we go. Perfect. Protection of citizens. Their rights with the preservation and improvement of their morals. Is there a moral aspect to governance? Is there an ethical aspect to the rule of law? If you ask most of the folks in the academy or academia today, if you ask most judges, if you ask a lot of legislatures, they're going to tell you, who are you to say what is right and what is wrong? Well, you can have something that's good for you, but my good is just as okay for me. I can be right and you can be right. We both can be right. The ceiling is purple. No, the ceiling's orange. No, the ceiling is black. No, folks, the ceiling is white. There is truth. There is a right and a wrong, a good and a bad, a just and a judgment. A couple of weeks ago, I was debating a pro-abortion rights professor from Calvin College, of all places, which tells you what's happening to the worldview of our Christian colleges these days. And we were at Cornerstone University, and I was debating this person, and the other person on the other side was the head of the National Organization of Women for some jurisdictional part of their organization. And they both got up and said, there is no male, there is no female, there is no human life except as we identify it and when we want to identify it. And they said, for you students out there, there's like a couple hundred students, you know, it's really complicated, you know, but if you hang with us for a while, we'll show you there's no such thing as male or female, and there's no such thing as human life until you identify it and when you identify it. So if you terminate you know, the pregnancy, they said, you know, you're not killing any human life, and they got to me and I'm scratching my head because they said it with such authority that these students were like, you could tell in the back of their mind they thought, there's something that's wrong about what they're saying. But they were listening because it sounded so good and they were appealing to the emotion. And you know, instead of having professors and stuff on the other side, I got to debate. My partner was a junior, a student that was the head of the pro-life movement there. And I could have not even showed up because this 20-year-old just shredded these professors on the other side. And when it came to us, we said, no, it's not complicated. It's very simple. They're not telling you the truth. And truth has to sometime, pretty soon in governance, matter. Because it actually is either male or female, and the biology professors and the anatomy professors will tell you at these institutions, if you ask them and if they tell you the truth, that those are male chromosomes. This is a male and a female. The physicians here will tell you the same thing. And that if you terminate that human life, it is the killing of somebody's son or daughter. It's not exercising the free exercise of my personal autonomy or identity. Is there a right and a wrong, a good and a bad, a just and an unjust? The other side is saying no. And don't think I'm exaggerating this. They are telling you there is no truth except as we create it. There is no right and wrong. There is no good and bad. Ravi Zacharias tells a story about a child that falls into a raging river. I happened, and I kind of identified with the story because I live on a part of the Grand River in Michigan that moves pretty fast, and it's pretty deep. And so I picture the story as he's telling it, you know, out my backyard, and this little child falls into a raging, deep river, and there are two people on the side, and they're debating whether to jump in and save her. And one guy saying, you know, I don't know if we should jump in or not because, you know, it's very dangerous. I could actually drown myself. Yeah, and so on the one hand, we've got this idea of self-preservation. You know, I'm not going to, you know, do something that could cause me to die. You know, on the other hand, this, you know, other philosopher is saying, well, you know, maybe we should jump in because it kind of have a herd mentality for the good of, you know, all of us. Perhaps, you know, we need to maybe do that. But no, you know, the safety. But I'm going to suggest, like Ravi did, that there is a third thing going on. The ought. What ought we do? Should we jump in because it's the right thing to do? Should we try and save that little baby in the rushing water because it's the right thing to do? The ought. You cannot escape the ought. The other side wants us to ignore that. The good book says what? He puts the law on our hearts. We can know the difference between right and wrong, good and bad. What's the thing we ought to do? You know, and our side says there are some moral absolutes. And I'm going to get to how they apply in government in a second, but we got to begin with that first step back because the other side's saying there's no moral absolute. And by the way, you can have a lot of fun, and I had a tremendous amount of fun a couple nights ago when we were debating those people because, you know, I put the ball up on the tee and she stepped right up and stepped right into it, you know, because she said, you know, Professor Wagner, the only reason you believe these things, the only reason you believe that there's human life inside a pregnant woman is because you're religious. And I said, well, no, that's not, that's partially true, but that's not the only reason. You know, I mean, even Jesus was he wasn't against the scientific principles of observation. You know, remember when Jesus actually died and then he rose from the dead, by the way, the number one most authenticated ancient historic fact in the world is the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Now, you don't have to believe that because it's documented better than any other ancient fact. We know that a number of things that happened during that time, and Jesus didn't say just believe it. I mean, he actually didn't. He wasn't against observation when Thomas doubted. What did he say? He said, look at the holes in my hand. Look at what they did to me on the side when they threw the spear through me. So they're not against observation, but the other side wants to get up and said there are no absolutes. You can't look to something to see whether it's right or wrong, good or bad, just or unjust. You're religious, so that's why you believe these things. No, it's not why I believe these things. It's part of the reason I believe these things, but God made me a rational human being too. She said, that's the difference between you and me. You think there's no moral absolutes, and you're wrong. You think there are moral absolutes, and you're wrong. There are no moral absolutes. And I've done this before, but it was so fun to do again. I looked at her and I said, are you absolutely sure? And again, as we go through this today, be thinking about how do we identify the false narrative being put up on the other side, and then gently, with a velvet hammer, respond with the truth. In a way that I probably didn't convert the now president or the pro-abortion rights professor that night, but you know there were 200 students that night that came away powerfully committed to the idea that moral absolutes exist and they matter in this world. And they matter in this world in our private lives, and they matter in this world in our governance. Can you imagine if we do what the other side says and we adopt a way of living based on it? You would have a different speaker here right now, because north wouldn't be south and south wouldn't be north, and when I punched in my GPS, I would have said, I don't have to listen to you. I feel like going the other way today because I don't want to have the sun in my eyes part way. You know, so north could be south today. Norm, you'd be giving this presentation probably better than I could be giving it right now. But, I mean, we rely on truth all the time. Relying on truth all the time. And it matters in our governance as well. And it matters in how we carry out the laws. A liberal professor was driving along one day, and he came to an intersection. And there was a stop sign, it was a four-way stop, and, you know, it was pretty late at night, and, you know, there wasn't any other traffic out there, so he kind of slows down as he gets to the stop sign, and he kind of just rolls on through and takes off. Well, the popo, the law enforcement, to protect and serve, are sitting on the other side. And he sees them. The police officer pulls him over. And he says, license and registration, please. Officer, why are you stopping me? It's so late at night. He says, you know, what's the law there? What's the stop sign? Oh, there was no cars coming. I slowed down. I looked both ways. Why are you stopping me? I slowed down. License and registration. But, officer, I'm telling you, there's no cars out here. I slowed down. Why, you know, step out of the car, sir. He pulls the guy out, takes out his nightstick, and starts beating him. And the liberal professor says, stop, stop, stop. And the officer goes, you want me to stop or just slow down? There's some right and wrong, good and bad, just and unjust. There's a Latin term, lex rex or rex lex. Are we? And I think it's the best picture of what happened in this nation to confirm for us that we must be a nation under the rule of law or not survive as a nation. Before we were a nation, the king was the law, and anything the king said, in fact, the king said, I'm even getting this from God. So, I am the law, and what I say, you must do, and if I change my mind, you must do it. And our founders said, no, there's a better way, a more righteous way. No one is above the law, not even the king. Either everyone, including our president and our members of Congress and our members of the judiciary, and I'm focusing on the third branch because they're the ones that are doing the most damage right now, somebody has to tell them, no, not even you, Justice Ginsburg, are above the law. Not even you, Richard Posner. And how many people have heard the name Richard Posner here before? A fair number. He is the most influential federal judge in the country. He doesn't sit on the Supreme Court, sits on the U.S. Court of Appeals, but he's a prolific writer. He has an entourage of liberal academics that follow him everywhere he goes, and let me buy you lunch, and he is the most influential legal writer in the United States today. About a week or so ago, he handed down an opinion interpreting a federal statute. Now, first of all, who writes the federal statutes? Your members of Congress. Who do they represent? You. And if you don't like what they write, what do? You go in and you throw them out and you hopefully put people in that'll do something better. In other words, the rule of law is accountable to you and we, the people. Judge Posner and the rest of the federal judiciary are appointed for life. They don't have to face an election. Why? Well, it's to insulate them from the political process so that they can decide cases based on what the law is and not have to worry about unfairly being thrown out at the next election. But with that privilege comes a tremendous amount of responsibility, and that is a responsibility to not make up the law as you go along, but to take the law as you get it and then apply it to a set of facts. Judge Posner had a statute in front of him that he wanted to advance his social engineering agenda on the people of the United States, and he handed down one of the most dangerous opinions I've ever seen written in the United States. A couple weeks ago, he said that we, the judiciary, have the power to not just look at a statute and see what it actually means when the legislature wrote it, which is what a good originalist would do. What did it mean when we wrote it? That's what it means. That's your legislative history. That's why the legislators will tell you that they make a legislative history, to make it clear to the judges, this is what we mean, don't say it means something else. Judge Posner said that we in the federal judiciary hold the power to ignore that meaning and change the meaning later if we think it's better for society to do so. And I say to him, who the H-E double toothpicks elected you to say that and to do that? And I'm sorry, I'm trying to be a good-faith person. I try never to cuss. But I'm telling you, when I read that opinion, I'm wondering how come there's not 5 members of Congress writing up articles of impeachment right now, because it's probably the most dangerous threat to our representative republic that we have, democratic republic that we have. Posner doesn't say there's a right and a wrong that I have to be under the law of. The Constitution doesn't regulate me. I don't have to be under that law. I get to be the law. I'm like the old King of England. I get to make it up as I go along. That's dangerous. What does God say? The king's heart is in the hand of the Lord. He directs it like a water course wherever he pleases. Now, I'm not suggesting that we should have a theocracy here. I am suggesting, though, that it is okay for legislators and it is okay for we as citizens to go to our legislators and be informed by ancient sacred tenets that are moral absolutes, rights and wrongs. Government has a proper role. Even if you're a student of the Bible, you see that God reveals in His Word that we are all to submit ourselves to the authorities. Why? Because, the authorities are there as God's agents to do good. Punish that which is wrong and condone that which is good and punish that which is evil, the Bible says. There's a proper role for the government. And our Constitution reflects those in the powers that we've given to the federal government, and all the ones that we didn't give to the federal government have been reserved to the states, that we've given to the states to do. And so it's proper for the government to protect us and to maintain order and preserve our liberties. That's under the rule of law. That's an ethical, moral absolute. But where in that rule of law, where in that Constitution, does it say that government should be the ones that control and direct the upbringing of our children? And how often do we see government stepping into our homes and usurping that role? No one is above the law, not even the folks that are trying to do that. Not even the folks that are trying to do that. Our founders understood this from the very beginning. We hold these truths to be self-evident. That all are created equal, endowed by their Creator, capital C, by the way, with certain unalienable rights. Unalienable, that's a term that means it was here at the beginning of time, it's going to be here until Jesus returns, and nobody can take it away. You can't give it away, it can't be taken away. Those are your fundamental liberties, and we know that. God's put that on your heart. If somebody in government tomorrow came in and said, you could no longer talk about and endorse a candidate, subject to prosecution, you wouldn't have to go to the American Constitution to know what the government was doing was wrong, right? Right or wrong, good or bad, just, unjust, constitutional, unconstitutional. The mother country, England. I don't know how many of you read this. Salt and Light Global, our organization, is trying to support these pastors right now. Some friends of mine are representing them, but there's some preachers in England that have been convicted criminally for, and don't miss the irony here, for quoting the King James Bible in public. Not the Geneva Bible, but the King James Bible. The King of England brought together the wisest and the most the most intellect in the world at the time to translate the Holy Bible into English, and now an Englishman many years later quotes that very Bible, that King James authorized Bible, and they now have a criminal record for doing that. And there's not other facts here. I'm not making up other stuff. They weren't inciting a riot. They weren't doing anything else. They quoted the King James Bible in public, and the judge said, yes, even in today's time, I, as a judge with a robe, with ink in my pen, can now make it a crime to have it be disorder in our country if you are quoting even the King James Bible if somebody finds it offensive. I'm not sure exactly what part it was, but I'm sure it had to do something with sexuality or something like that, because that's the social engineering of the day going on over there. What does it mean for us in a conservative movement that are trying to re-educate those who govern us and re-educate a citizenry on what these conservative values actually mean? I mean, how is it supposed to work? Well, one of the things I think we need to do is just kind of, tell stories and then ask a lot of questions. Jesus asked a lot of questions. And why do we separate power, for example? Why does the rule of law in our country have a moral absolute that says we're not going to give all the power to one person? Well, because absolute power corrupts or power corrupts and absolute power corrupts. Absolutely, as Lord Acton said. Well, let's go back a little earlier than somebody that's sitting in the White House right now, or somebody that's sitting in Congress, or somebody that's sitting in a federal court. And why did they separate powers in the first place? Well, I got to tell you, there were some secular, what they like to call themselves, Enlightenment thinkers out there that our founders read, and we as conservatives should not, ignore that or deny that, because then we lose legitimacy if we don't, share all the truth. But predominantly they understood that we are a nation under law because we are a nation under God. And while they looked at Montesquieu and Locke for the idea of separation of powers, they also looked to Isaiah, the Lord is our judge, the Lord is our lawgiver, the Lord is our king. And if you look to what our founders read when they were forming these moral absolutes that would allow for good governance under the rule of law, they were reading the Holy Bible and citing the Holy Bible far more than they were citing some of these other authorities. A little baby is given a rattle. And if you play with that rattle, the baby's playing with it. Because that baby was born good, right? That's why the baby's having a good time. No. We weren't born good. But I tell you, if you ask people sitting in our academic institutions, and you ask the students that they're teaching in our academic institution if they are born good, the vast majority are going to say, yeah, they were, or at least with a clean slate. We got to be able to show that, no, they weren't born good. Introduce the second baby. The second baby crawls over. Says, I'd like to partake in your rattle playing with you. What does the first baby say? No, it's mine. It's mine. And in fact, if the second baby tries to take it away, there will be an altercation that goes on. Well, those babies grow up, and they work in those buildings over there today. And that rattle symbolizes power. It's a good metaphor for power today. That's why we have separation of powers, because our founders at their very core understood that all have sinned and fallen short. And we don't put all the power in one place. Oh boy. Could you forward it, maybe? Well, we'll lose the screen then. And we'll go old school. This power cord is going to represent the exercise of government power. All right, some of you have seen me before when I talk about this. At the end of this power cord, I've got some red tape. Why? Because when government uses its power, they make red tape. Well, the moral absolutes, the good governance under the rule of law in our nation is our Constitution. And if anybody in this building here in Congress or in the White House in the executive branch are going to act, they first have to go where? To the Constitution to find a power source. And so when Congress passed Obamacare, they had to have a power source. And so they said, medicine, we're selling a lot of stuff, our services, that's got to be commerce. And in the Constitution, there's a power source that allows Congress to regulate commerce among the states. So let's plug into that power source. Well, how many physicians we have here. I know we got at least one because he's running for office here. You know, you probably have on your office a where you graduated from and a certificate, a license that says you are licensed in the state of where? Michigan to practice medicine. He didn't get that license from the federal government. He got it from Michigan. Why? Because the regulation of Michigan, or the regulation of medicine, you know, is not a federal power. Why? Because if you read the powers that we, the people, have given to Congress, it doesn't include regulating medicine, does it? That's why under the 10th Amendment and the 9th Amendment, all the rest of the power is left to the states, and that's why the state of Michigan authorizes this physician to be licensed to practice in Michigan. And so, guess what? That exercise of government power goes to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court reviews it. It's intentional that the Supreme Court's a little off-key right here and looking like it's ready to fall. I didn't straighten it out on purpose. It's leaning left. And so Obamacare goes to the Supreme Court, and they ask the question, just like every one of you should do anytime you see anybody in one of these branches using power. What was your power source? The ethical, moral question you must ask is, did you just act on your own? Or is there a rule of law in the Constitution? Did you have a power source that you relied upon? And guess what? The president's lawyer, the Solicitor General, couldn't answer that question. Because no, there was no power source in the Commerce Clause that was proper for passing Obamacare. So Obamacare was found unconstitutional, violation of the Commerce Power is not authorizing the Congress to enact the law. How many people heard about that? A few of you, not too many. That's because it was on page 27 in really fine print at the bottom of the page or something. But it also because the president's lawyer, the Solicitor General, like all good lawyers say, well, if you don't like this idea, try this one. And there is another power source that Congress could have plugged into. It's called the taxing power, and they use that power pretty, effectively, don't they? They plug into the taxing power, and they said it kind of softly when he was there, because there's an election coming up. This is really, if it is the taxing power, it's the largest tax ever imposed upon the American people in the history of the nation. But if you're not going to go with the Commerce Power, let's say it's the taxing power. And they found five justices to agree with them. And so now we have a power source that is, according to the Supreme Court, a proper power source, and Obamacare becomes the law of the land. Well, the next question you have to ask yourself, what's that? It's working on? The next question you have to ask yourself then is, now that we've exercised power, what about our liberty? Is there any part of our rule of law in our Constitution, is there any part of the moral absolutes in here that exercise of power is interfering with? Well, sure enough, and we've got some cases that are in our legal division at the Justice Center where a man owns a company, pretty big company. He was facing millions and millions of dollars in fines from the federal government if he did not put into place an insurance program at his business for all his hundreds of employees that will allow for the killing of unborn sons and daughters of his employees. And he said, I can't do that. And so the next question then is, well, government may have used its power to make the law, but is the exercise of that power, even if you have a proper power source, interfering with one of our fundamental and inalienable liberties? Well, what do you think we argued? We argued that this government action is interfering with this businessman's moral, unalienable right of the free exercise of religious conscience. And praise report, we got a judge to strike down the Obama action, and he didn't face millions of dollars of fines. He didn't lose his company. All his employees are still gainfully employed because of it. But he was willing to lose his company instead of being forced to participate in a program that would kill unborn sons or daughters, you know, of his employees. What do you do when you have a judge, though, like Posner and Ginsburg and some of these judges on the Supreme Court that are saying this doesn't matter anymore? Or worse, Posner saying not only does this not matter, but the legislative statutes passed by the people's branch don't matter either. I get to make it up as I go along. I've got ink in my pen. What are these judges doing? These judges are taking a moral absolute and they're ignoring this analysis between, you know, our need to maintain order in society and our desire for liberty, and then looking at a moral absolute, a rule of law, and deciding the case based on what the law is, and they're instead saying, we're going to remove the idea that there's a moral absolute, and we are going to make ourselves the moral absolute. And doesn't matter that doesn't matter that I don't have to face the electorate, all the better, because I can get what's good for you into policy faster that way. And if you think I'm crazy, I've only got a minute to finish here. The Supreme Court actually passed what they call the lemon test, and I'm hoping we're very close to a new majority that will change this. But at one time there was a majority on the Supreme Court that said, if you are going to use power in government, you cannot be informed by any sacred ideas. You have to have a secular purpose for every time you exercise power. In other words, these members of the Supreme Court came and said, there is no moral absolute, except as we on the court decide on any given day. And so is it any wonder that those that support abortion say that's not a human being, that there's no such thing as a male or a female? Is there any wonder that they say that when in truth it is a baby, and it is either a baby son or a baby daughter that is going to be killed if an abortion occurs? Is it any wonder that we now can, in the place of biology and anatomy and science, deny all that science and say the law of the land must be that you ignore the science, you ignore the medical truth, and you say government policy must allow a man to go into a little girl's bathroom at a public school shower or a public school shower if that man on that given day decides to deny science, deny biology, deny anatomy, deny medical truth, and say, I feel like a little girl today. And if you think I'm making this up or exaggerating it, that is the law of the land in many places in the United States right now. We are fighting it every day, and I call on you to help reintroduce what being a conservative really means. And part of what being a real conservative really means is that we stand up and we say truth does exist. There is a right, there is a wrong, there is a good, there is a bad, there is a just, there is an unjust. These ideals are reflected in our Constitution. The Constitution isn't dead. It does matter. And we need to take on this idea that judges don't get to make up liberty. Because if they can give you liberty, instead of it being that self-evident truth that is, that unalienable truth that is here from the beginning of time and end of time, a truth that we can measure right and wrong against, a truth that we can look at our members of Congress, our president, and say, hey, you are following the law. A truth that we can look at Supreme Court justices and say, hey, you are following the law, and then if you don't, we can have some response to it. It's either that for our country, or folks wearing robes that don't have to face an election get to say, I know what's best for you, and I'm going to implement it, and it's going to have the same force of law as if it was done through the legislature or the constitutional process. These judges have created a liberty called personal autonomy and personal identity. That liberty sits right next to the First Amendment right of freedom of speech and the free exercise of religious conscience and the Second Amendment right to bear arms. And the Supreme Court treats them as having equal power. That's the level that, and the status that this new fake liberty has been given by the Supreme Court. If we allow them to let them do that, they will continue to find factual context in which to apply that liberty. So personal autonomy and identity, that fake liberty that the Supreme Court created, now authorizes abortion. I can show you where it struck down a law trying to stop partial birth abortion. I can show you where it was allowed to allow unhealthy, dangerous, and immoral sexual conduct to become something the government couldn't regulate. I can show you where it's now said that there can be same-sex marriage. I can show you now where lawyers are now arguing and trying to get to the Supreme Court that a man could say, I'm feeling like a little girl today, going to deny biology and go into. So my time is up. The choice is ours. Will we stand for truth? Will we have the courage to identify the false narratives and with gentle love of Jesus, using a velvet hammer, smash the untruth and replace it with truth? That's my challenge to you. God bless you guys for what you're doing.
I'd like to ask the next panel to assemble up here, please. William, thank you for all you do. It's not much, but we've prepared for you a Defender of Faith Award. Appreciate it. So, God bless you. Now, let me tell you, if you all become precinct delegates, maybe we can recruit him to run for Supreme Court or Attorney General or something like that, you know. We need people of faith who have got clear thinking, and the work he and his group are doing is just so awesome. And you'll hear from Richard Thomas this afternoon, another one. William's also involved with David Kaufman in a group called Great Lakes Justice Project, and they are taking on the tough cases and standing up to government, and your faith and your courage is so much appreciated. Thank you.
We have a table over here, and I've got some gifts for you to stop by, a free book and things like that, so feel free to pick it up. Top floor.
This panel begins with Chris Fawcett, who's going to moderate it. He's a graduating senior at Michigan State University, one of our young Christian conservatives who ran for office a couple times himself. We have Christine Barnes, who's a county commissioner in Eaton County, defeating an incumbent Democrat. And Jason and Tom, I'll let you take this, Chris.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for having us out today. I'm going to do a quick introduction of myself, and then I'll allow the panelists to introduce themselves and give themselves a little bit about who they are and how they won their elections. So, like you said, my name is Chris Fawcett. I'm a senior right now at Michigan State. I've been very active on campus. I was the president of Turning Point USA on campus, which is a nonprofit group designed to promote capitalism and small government. I'm also involved with Spartans for Israel on campus, and I'm a very, big supporter of the CRs, and I've done a lot with them. And we've been fighting on campus. The People's Republic of East Lansing is hard to live in. It is. We're always getting flack and everything, but you're doing a good thing if you're getting flack, because that means you're fighting for the right things. And in addition to that, this time around, I ran for Ingham County Commissioner. And as you know, Ingham County is pretty blue. It's one of the blue counties in Michigan, and I did not win. But I can tell you one thing. I want to give you advice. If you're going to run for local office and you live in a Democratic area, do not slack off. Run as hard as you can, because you never know, you can still win. But even more importantly, is you are representing the conservative movement. And you need to show them that we are here and we're making a presence. I got more votes than Donald Trump. And that showed something. That means I actually flipped some people, and I showed them that I showed them the right way. I showed them conservative principles. And having the ability to run allows you to go to people's doors, knock on their door, and explain to them what it means to be a conservative, and a lot of people loved it. People loved the message, even though they were very hard liberals, and they voted for me. So you can do a lot of good, even though you're not in a winnable district. So just keep that in mind. If you're not there, in a winnable district. Run your hardest, because you're still doing a good thing and you can flip some people. So now I'll switch it over to the panelists, and we'll start with Christine Barnes, and she'll give us a little bit about herself. Thank you.
Awesome. Good morning, everyone. I see a lot of military hats out there, so I just want to say thank you very much for your service. I appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. So I'm Christine Barnes. I'm just a normal, everyday girl. I've never been in politics. I didn't go to school for politics. I've always loved politics. One day at a Ted Cruz for Michigan event, somebody looked at me and said, "You live in a Democratic area. Would you consider running for county commissioner?" And I said, "Well, if I'm a want, no. If I'm a need, okay, I'll go talk to my husband and then I'll pray." And the entire time I ran, my prayer was, "Your will, not mine." And I won. So I'm now a county commissioner since the 1st of January this year. I'm incredibly grateful to the person who got me into this, which is Margot Asseltine. She's not here today, but she is my mentor and somebody that I look up to a great deal. So it's her fault I'm here. There's a lot of work in winning, and there are a lot of people that helped me win, and many of them are here in this room today. Darius is here. I saw Bruce Barlin, Gina. There are many people here that gave their time, their energy, their money, their intellectual property, and that's really where it starts. You need a tribe. It takes a lot of effort to win even just a local race, but it is going door to door. I heard that last night, I heard that today. It's going door to door and giving a message. My message was abolishing toast in Eaton County. I would go to the door and say, "Did you know that you cannot sell your home without government approval in Eaton County?" And nobody knew that. So if you have a well and septic in Eaton County, you must have it inspected and you must get government approval. And if your well doesn't pass, then they make you come up to an arbitrary standard, and that increases the value on your home about $20,000, which increases the commissions for the real estate agent. It also increases the taxes for the county. So when I went to the door and told folks about this, they were flabbergasted. That's one of the main reasons I think I was able to turn my district. So I did sort of a broad scope of work. I sent, my husband wrote a spousal letter, so I sent postcards to all my absentee voters. I knocked doors, I did robocalls, I did fundraisers. There was a lot of work in getting involved. The hard work begins once you get elected. There are a lot of people that like to use the word conservative like it doesn't mean anything, right? They go into a meeting, or you get elected and you look at the board makeup and 6 people identify as conservative until it comes time to vote. Then when it comes time to vote, I never see a dollar they don't want to spend or power they don't want to take. And so that's really where the hard work that's where it gets tough. And that's where I'm at right now, trying to lead the way. I've lost many votes. I call for roll call votes to make people stand by what they say instead of just anonymously saying yay or nay. I've lost a couple of them, but we still keep up the fight. It'd be great if some of you would join us. We need more conservatives on the boards for schools, county commission, citizen advisory panels have a lot of weigh-in. So if you don't want to run for an elected office, running for a board, every county has a citizen advisory panel for different subject matters. if a county office is more time than you can give, look at citizen advisory panels.
Awesome. We'll move on to Jason now, but I want to say one quick thing is on your tables, there's note cards. If you have questions for any of the panelists, because we'll be taking questions, make sure to write them down and they'll come up here. So, thank you.
All right, okay, we're working here. Hi, I'm Jason Gilman. In 2010, we had just started really rolling with the Tea Party movement. Very active. We had the largest Tea Party in the state, frankly, in Traverse City. In fact, my wife organized it. I hosted. We had the Tea Party Express come in, you know, of course, they were doing their thing. After that, I was talking to some political characters in town. They said, you ought to run for county commissioner. And there was an incumbent county commissioner who was basically an administrator's, his tool. And I thought about it, we talked about it, I ran for county commissioner, I got some assistance. He was an incumbent Republican, and I beat him in a district where he lived, in the majority of the district. Nobody had ever beaten an incumbent who was resident in that district ever before for that particular seat. And it was a heck of a ride. As a county commissioner, I immediately took on one of the biggest, it's crazy that it'd be one of the biggest mistakes, but they took the veterans baseball program and they turned it into a government program. The county took the veterans, the American Legion baseball program, and said, we own this now because you have it on our fields. And we turned that around. I said, no, that's not how it works. And the American Legion baseball program is now, it suffered in the first year that they did that. Immediately after getting it back, the enrollment in the baseball program went back up. It's been growing every year since, and it's been a raging success, as it had been for 62 years prior to the county trying to take the baseball program. One of the other things we did there, which I'm very proud of, was working with the Michigan Freedom to Work Committee, is we passed the first resolution at the county board in support of Michigan Freedom to Work, and that was in 2012. And we had the greatest crowds they'd ever seen. A lot of them for, and a lot of them against. But we passed it. We passed it nearly unanimously, except for the one Democrat who was on the board. Other counties had taken that. They took that resolution and they passed their own version of it. And as you know, history is our guide. We were successful. At the same time I was on the county commission, I was installed as the liaison to the Traverse Area District Library. Now, the Traverse Area District Library had a competent director and kind of a decent board. It was operating certainly within its means. But, you know, as you know, costs for government go up. I was able to arrange a change from the liaison position to a membership on the trustee board position. And as it turned out, because of library law in Michigan, I got to keep that seat when I was done being a county commissioner. And we'll get back to that in a second, but in 2012, when we redistricted, it changed up the county commission seats, and I ran for state representative. I lost. I challenged an incumbent, Wayne Schmidt. Who wouldn't? But after that, they had the Traverse City Area Public Schools had a $100 million bond. Now, Traverse City is an area that generally supports all bond requests. $100 million 20-year bond. Think about that. I mean, that's an awful lot of money. Well, I took it on. We spent great capital on it, and we defeated it. We took what probably would have passed without any resistance from a 60-40 win to a 60-40 defeat. We also, at the same time, I was able to catch them on campaign finance violations, and we had the Secretary of State rule in our favor on that. And shortly thereafter, I was able to essentially get the superintendent to resign. And there's no more of that. It set the tone for the next couple of years, though. Northwestern Michigan College, which also had a bond, which was a little frivolous. That bond failed the following year as well. People started to pay attention. Hey, what is all this money that we're being asked for? Now, do I support millages? Well, one might say I've got to. I'm currently the president of the Traverse Area District Library. A few years ago, I took on the, sorry, I'm running a little long here. A few years ago, I took on the Traverse Area District Library as its personnel chair. We had already been downsizing through technology improvements the staffing levels in the library. But as you know, the biggest problem is not typically the staffing levels, it's the administrative levels. And so I targeted the very top of the heap. We eliminated the director's position and reassigned the duties. We had to create another director to stay within library law. But what it did is it immediately saved the district $62,000 a year. And, as it turns out, made everybody happier about their jobs. So, a little bit of success there. I'll pass it on and we'll move forward.
Tom, you're up.
Okay. Anyway, I'm the village president in Sand Lake. I've been involved in the conservative movement a little bit longer than the Tea Parties were around. The biggest thing that we've done is something a little bit different. I believe all politics is local. A lot of us feel very helpless of what's going on in Lansing or anywhere in the state where we vote for something, they disregard our vote. It really ticks a lot of us off, to be quite frank. So I've been on the council now for 3 years now, because I was appointed and then ran as a write-in and won against an incumbent, and then I ran as village president and won against somebody a family that ran the village for about 45 years. When I came on there, I remember my first meeting was with our auditor, and he sat there and said the village is going to have to raise taxes, raise fees, or go bankrupt. I talked to the council, there's 7 members of us, and I got 4 of them to agree to hand off a lot of the budgeting from the village president at that time to me. I was able to renegotiate a bunch of contracts, our telecommunication contracts, our insurance, our police, our fire, everything else. By the end of my first year, we had a $9,000 surplus, which doesn't sound like much, but when you're looking at bankruptcy, that's a big deal. So then when they passed the gas tax, the carrot in there to get local governments to support it was, we're going to give you more money. We're going to give you so much more. You just need to support it. They brought the press in, and they were sitting there, our roads are some of the worst in Kent County, actually some of the worst in the state. And they brought it in there, they had a resolution, our village president did it, they had some MY people and everything else in there, and the resolution couldn't get a vote. His wife proposed it, because she was on the board. He couldn't get a second after I was done talking. And the next thing you know, they couldn't get a resolution, pressed it up and walked out. Then the governor goes through, passes it through the state legislature. And this is the part where everybody feels like they're not empowered, because whatever we vote on, they disagree with. And this is why every single one of you should get involved in local government. Our road millage is coming up right after they pass the gas tax. And they're not taking it away. I know that. I'm a realist. I understand they really don't care how you vote. They're going to do what they want. So I got the rest of the council to agree to cut our millage in half, because 90% of our voters have been opposed to the gas tax. And in every community, there's a millage for roads, there's a millage for fire, there's a millage for the budget, there's a millage for something. When the voters of the state say no, if you can find the money in your budget, if you can make it work, give them the cut that they wanted. I can't fix every community, but being involved locally, we've been able to cut the taxes down and do what the voters wanted. Our job at a local level is to represent the people in those areas, and that's why we need to get involved. That is conservative governance. Fiscal conservatism, the first part of it, to conserve resources. That is what fiscal conservative means. I got one in here. Every year in our area for the past, I think it's about 6 years now, we found 2 to 6 local races to get involved in. The only one this year I got right now is in the city of Grand Rapids. Mr. Boersma running for county commissioner. But in the past 6 years, we've taken control in Kent County of Algoma Township, Cortland Township, Village of Sand Lake, Cedar Springs. We've gotten a third on the Rockford Council. We've taken over Tyrone Township. We've taken over Spencer. We've taken over Cortland. And we've also so to take over Alpine Township and Sparta. That's pretty good. And every single one of them, when their villages have come up, have been able to figure out ways to save money. I've been able to get some businesses in our community in a matter of the past year and a half as village president. My budget this year is a $37,000 surplus. And we've cut taxes on it. And we brought in businesses. And we figured out how to make it grow. And a lot of it's negotiation, and it's because the rest of the council members have seen that if you sit there and quit just looking at the carrots that the state government hands you and figure out how to make your community successful together, you can grow. We have a community engagement team. All this stuff that we don't actually operate. We formed it, and as a village, we quit paying for these things and got people to put their own money into the community. Because state government operating a garden club or a local government operating a garden club makes it so it doesn't work. So to me, local government and fiscal conservatism is getting everybody in the community engaged, educating them, bringing them onto your side, getting them involved to become successful. Because as conservatives, we believe in individual responsibility. Therefore, we must individually trust the residents.
We have a new panelist, Dwayne, and he will introduce himself.
I'm Dwayne Zantot from Plymouth Township. As I walked in, I'm a little unprepared. Norm asked me to speak this morning. I'm a delegate in Plymouth Township, and for 20 years we had a treasurer in our township who was a dictator. He controlled 5 of the 7 board members, and they always voted along with him. In 2012, I helped re-elect him because he had an R behind his name. As soon as they were elected, they shut down one of our fire stations. They gave themselves a $10,000 raise, spent $4 million in our park on things. We built a pavilion that is not even used to this day. They wanted to build a pavilion, and we really don't need this because we have the downtown Plymouth area, and we consider it one community. This kept going on and on. They kept spending money. We recruited people to come to the board meetings. Nobody ever came. So we ended up getting people at every board meeting. We put 300 letters out to people around the park and got people involved. They would not listen. They kept spending money. They would not stop. So my good friend Patrick Kobeck, the treasurer put his son up to run against him because he's my friend. Of course he lost, and the way we put videos up on every board meeting and put them up on our Facebook page. We had 780 followers. And then we did a recall. We failed because they went to court and delayed us, put us right in the middle of the winter. Then finally our township treasurer left. When he left, they appointed an outsider who moved into our township for 1 month. So we actually ended up recruiting Democrats and Republicans and the old gray-haired folks like myself. We turned it around, and we beat them in a landslide election. We replaced 5 of the 7 board members. Our 2 good guys are still there. Thank you.
All right, time to move on to questions. So if you guys have a question, you wrote one on a card, just raise your hand, and someone will come around and pick it up. Okay. Darius, you want to grab those? Perfect. Okay, Christine, this one's for you, and we'll have you answer this for about 2 minutes, and then Jason has a question for him.
Yeah, I would if I could see. Have you changed, oh, have I been, so is it essentially, have I been able to change anything with the toast, with this, septic inspections? No. When I ran for office, our chairman told me I could say whatever I wanted at the door because it wouldn't come up for a vote. So I'm currently working from the inside, and I trying to get well and septic toast to come up in committee, and I've got a little bit of traction, so I'm working on it.
Perfect. All right, and then this question is for Jason. So did you know there are a number of children being taken away from their homes by social services just because their parents are not able to afford to take care of them, and what are your takes on this?
This isn't really something that I'm aware that government has overreach, and I'm against government overreach, and I have a problem oftentimes, and we have a responsibility, of course, to the safety of our children, but I think there certainly is government overreach at times. As a commissioner, I never had to address this, though we had to address health issues at times. I know that we do have some programs in our county government, though, that I felt uncomfortable with, and that's some of the judges' advocacy programs, and they're like little, like little fiefdoms that operate in the court system. They all have, as you know, a mission for the children, and but in the end, they operate kind of contrary to that. But I'm not an expert on that. I'll tell you right now, if you want to ask me about library stuff, I can tell you this, or ask me about pensions, or both of those. I can tell you this right now, as far as our libraries concerned. One thing I didn't mention, and I'd like to take advantage of this time, is this is kind of a why are we winning? It's because we want to make a difference. I feel like I missed the ball by not mentioning this. We had a defined benefit program at the library. We attacked it 2 years ago. In this last fall, we got rid of it. It's a defined contribution plan now, and we have a new contract, and everybody is happier for it. And so it's a good solution. But I'm going to basically give the mic back here because that wasn't.
And Christine would like to touch on this real quick as well.
Okay, so I am in a lot of volunteer activities, and one of the things that I do, I am a board member for CASA, which stands for Court Appointed Special Advocate. And in Eaton and Berry County, whenever there is a divorce or a child has been taken from the home, there is a CASA automatically assigned to the case. A CASA is appointed by the judge to be an advocate only for the child. So they are, because they're appointed, they have access to all the medical records, employment records, school records for everybody in the family, and they intake the case and then write a recommendation directly to the judge, sort of taking out all of that CPS and government overreach. So if this is an area that concerns you, look at being a CASA volunteer. Shameless plug, in Berry County, next weekend, or next Friday at noon, we have a free luncheon. So if you're interested, touch base with me and I'll get you in the door for free and you can learn more about the program.
All right, so this question is for anyone who wants to answer it, and that is, how can we change things if the Democrats won't work with us on these local boards? So, would like to, Tom?
In our village, I got 2 Democrats on the board. They're much more liberal than I am. They're actually the ones that set up the community engagement teams, and I had to convince to have the village quit funding it because their family's been there a long time. So they actually agreed to it, set it up independently, and I told them I'd help raise money in the community, and we've done that. So a lot of it's not so much Democrat as Republican, because the 2 people I have the hardest time working with in order to balance the budget and cut it are actually Republicans. They've been Republican precinct delegates. He was in the executive committee up there for 20 years before me. He used to be heavily involved in the state party years ago. So it really depends. It's not so much as Democrat or Republican. It really is a logic. You take a look up in the UP. They got a Democrat up there that votes more Republican than most of our Republican legislatures. So really working with them, it really depends on the individual and the person. You have to be able to articulate your position in a logical way. I don't insult them. I don't name call them. I get called everything in the book by people who sit there and debate with me, and I try to stay as calm as possible in the discussion. Because the only thing I need on the board is a simple majority to get it passed and done. Because, for instance, when I talked about cutting the roads out, or how bad our roads are, I'm repaving 100% of them over the next 36 months without raising taxes too. So you're talking about a 100% repave in a village that was almost bankrupt less than 3 years ago. So a lot of it is getting each person in the community to work with you. Forget the labels. Work with them on those pieces that you can. If they start seeing that conservative government works, they'll vote with you more and more.
Do anyone like to say something as well?
It was unbelievable in Plymouth Township. I had people at the polls, Democrats, supporting our Republicans, handing out literature for our people. We all worked together. It was great.
I just want to say most often it's the Democrats that are, when you're at the table with the Democrats, that at least you know where they stand. It's oftentimes the Republicans that you don't know where they stand, that are more unreliable when it comes to a vote than a Dem.
Awesome. So the next question is for all of you as well. How did straight party ticket voting affect your races? Would like to.
Mine, it doesn't affect at all. Mine's nonpartisan. But straight ticket voting is for the lazy voter, and the reason why it's on top of there is so you can get a few more rhinos and a few more fake Democrats in there. That's actually what it's done. It's for the control of the parties in each area. And honestly, I think we'd be better off, even me as a very active Republican, if I had an independent who could sit there and make a run for it. Everybody's opinion matters. That's part of this country. That's why we were supposed to vote on the gas tax and all these other ballot proposals. It's because your voice matters. So though I'm a proud Republican, at the same token, everybody has a right to voice their opinion, and straight ticket kind of helps silence differences of opinion.
Anyone else like to touch on that one, or?
I agree. It's for the lazy voter. Yeah, it is for the lazy voter. I think it's name recognition. If you have name recognition, by getting your signs out there and doing what you can for people to know your name, they won't, if they're not straight ticket voting, they'll cross the party line just because they know your name.
Awesome. Anyone else like to touch on that, or? Good. Perfect. All right, Tom, this one's directed at you. How could a united conservative movement help flip boards and also fill the minor leagues that State House Senate candidates come from? What can Michigan CPAC do to help?
That's kind of loaded. How CPAC can help is everybody in this room probably has 5 or 6 friends that are conservative at least, right? I'm going to pick on Macomb County real quick. There's a gentleman over there. Some people love him, some people hate him. I just forgot his name off the top of my head. Stan Brock. I walked into that room when I was running for outreach vice chair. And whether you love or hate the man, what was impressive is how he engaged the community. They had 600 people sitting in that room to go to convention between the 9th and 10th district in there. That's why I say love them or hate them doesn't matter. If everybody in this room got 5 or 10 friends involved through legions, Eagle Clubs, whatever organizations else you're involved in, go in there and recruit them. And if you were able to walk into your counties with that many people, guess what? You're going to start winning with them. You're going to be able to recruit candidates for local government. You're going to be able to recruit candidates for the minor leagues. You're going to be able to recruit good candidates for state house and everything else. And what we got to be able to start doing is looking at people who are successful and trying to figure out how they're doing it. So that's why I tell him, love or hate him doesn't matter. What matters is what he's doing is just impressive. We need people involved at that level. We need people like that. We need to be able to do that ourselves. And we can sit there and complain, but if we are unable to recruit, then we are unable to win.
Perfect. I know that was directed at Tom, but does anyone else want to touch on anything there?
And I think part of the political thing is actually being political. I hate to say it, but if the first thing you say to somebody is how much you hate something, they're going to tune you out. Okay, and if you're recruiting somebody and you want them to immediately attack something, they're going to tune you. What we need to do is build on things that we can at least agree with. And we talked about the Democrats a couple of minutes ago. Find the things that we have in common. There are certainly things we have in common. I mean, it's kind of funny. You'd think by the nature of things that Democrats wouldn't support private property rights. They do. They like their stuff. They like their stuff just like you like your stuff. They like your stuff too. The point is, though, you build on those things and build some agreement in areas that can lead you to building some kind of coalition. I'll tell you, when I ran as a county commissioner in 2010, I had signs in Democrats' yards and Republican yards. And the reason I did is because there were some things that I knew we could work on that were to both of our benefit. And I think when we're recruiting, and I know that I see Randy in the back here. Randy, up north, we recruited a Democrat to run in a particular election once upon a time because we didn't think that the Republican was going to come out of it, looking the way we want him to look. So there are things that we can agree on and move the bar forward.
Jason, this one's for you as well. How did you defeat a $100 million school millage?
A great big stop sign. I spent $8,000 on postcards. And I'll tell you, one of the reasons this millage was crazy was they had a $26 million auditorium as a part of it. They called it the $26 million Performing Arts Center. Okay? Now, they immediately dropped that once I started attacking it on that. They started trying to back away from that being the primary focus of the bond. But the reality was, it was all about a $26 million performing arts complex. Now, after the election, and they lost, some kids invited us to their old beat-up auditorium, their old beat-up playhouse for a performance of Fiddler on the Roof. My wife and I, she says, are you sure we want to go? They sent us 2 tickets in the mail because I called it fluff, the $26 million auditorium performing arts complex. And we went there, we sat in comfortable seats, the audio is excellent, and the guy comes out and he says, I'm Devya. Welcome to our performance of Fiddler on the Roof, a story almost as old as this auditorium. And then he proceeded to say, but that's not fluff. And they were, looking right at us. They knew where our seats were. It's kind of funny, how did we defeat it? A great big stop sign that we put on a postcard, and we basically told the truth. This is what this is about. And why it's about. It was that simple. I got on the radio, I did radio ads. I did some video productions that we passed along on YouTube that were seen by 3 people. It was productive because we were on the street, we were talking about, we did some radio interviews and got the postcards out. I think you got to reach as many people as you can, but then that kind of stuff has its own weight. People start talking about it. You get the chatter going. And that's really what you got to do when you're trying to defeat something like that, is you get the chatter going, get people asking questions. The emperor has no clothes. Oh my God, the emperor has no clothes. How did we miss that? So that's how we defeated it.
Perfect. All right, Tom, this next one's at you. Tell us how you involve veterans, and also, if you're going to run a slate, how do you make sure that slate works together and wins?
Well, I forgot to mention we actually have a majority in Plainfield Township too, and that's a huge township in Kent County. They, usually if we run a slate, what I do is we find 1 or 2 candidates that are running in there, and then we have them recruit their own slate. I don't go out shopping for the slate. They do it. They have to like each other. They have to work together with each other. And then that's how we actually go through and doing it. Now with veterans, I'm going to have to stand up for a second. With veterans is a little bit different. Like for instance, today I have a suicide prevention range day that I spent money on. I think right now when I was texting Dean, there's 180 veterans out there. Now, most of them I'd be trying to get to here, but when they're in the exact same day and they're both scheduled 6 to 8 months out, it becomes very difficult. So I told them, so I have people who run that range day and do stuff, and I have a lot of them that are local elected people, but that range raises money for suicide prevention for veterans. That's where most of our funding comes from. That thing will make probably today between $6,000 and $10,000 for suicide prevention, and a lot of that's paying bills, helping make sure people don't lose their homes, and making sure that they're not depressed. So that's how we get them involved. And then with the slates, as long as it's, get 1 or 2 people who want to run in there that and then they recruit the rest of the slate. And then when they run, they're all from within they all know each other. And the kicker part is they start networking. And the other thing is, I ran for state house and lost, but running basically the equivalent to a bare bones state house campaign in a local election, you will beat them every single time because they're not anticipating it. That's why at local races, out of, I think a grand total of 21 local seats that we've ran, we've only lost 1 local election so far at township level or lower. And that was my wife's, and she didn't feel like listening to me, so.
Perfect. Seeing as we have no more questions up here, I have a question I'd like to ask you guys, and that is, with so many Democrats who are on the fringe of now voting for Republicans due to Donald Trump and our movement becoming more unified, how do you message this to them? How do you tell them it's okay to come over to our side when many of their friends and family members are gonna go after them for it? And I'd like each one of you to answer this one. So who wants to start? Perfect.
So I think the biggest starting point for getting Democrats to vote for you is finding that common ground that Jason was talking about. Sometimes it's difficult to find that common ground, but you can start with something basic like, I don't think kicking dogs is right, do you? And sometimes that is exactly where you have to start. You have to start with something very, very basic. And I think respect is huge. Reaching into the millennial generation, conservatives, we don't tend to be that millennial generation, with a few exceptions, but finding out that empowering their difference, empowering them that they don't need to be labeled, that's what I do. I had a strong millennial following in my district.
In the case of Plymouth Township, I had some Democrats that were my enemies. In the end, I passed out 300 letters around. We went into this, you got to find a common issue. We found this park issue where they wanted to they spent millions of dollars over there when we shut our fire department down, so we had a common issue. So we all came together, and I befriended the Democrats, and I couldn't believe it, but they were handing out literature at the polls for the Republicans, and they all voted with us.
What did Donald Trump do to pull a lot of Democrats into the Republican ranks and vote, or a lot of independents who have typically voted Democrat? What's the one big issue that really changed things? It's the immigration issue. All right? And what he did was he didn't just say immigrants are bad or that illegal immigrants are bad. He said illegal immigrants are bad. Look, they're killing people. They're hurting our people. And he explained the connection to the subject and then what was happening there, okay? Back when I was in school, I'm a pretty smart guy. I'm good with mathematics and everything, but I got poor math grades at times because I didn't show my work. And we could say, hey, this is the way to go. But, like the math problem, we need to kind of lead the Democrats along the way. And once they saw the connections to the problem, you know, the cause and the effect, and they were able to put it together properly. Now, unfortunately, in a lot of cases, we find closed minds. We meet a lot of resistance. You know, we say, well, they don't think logically, or the liberals don't think logically. Well, sometimes we have to, piece by piece, we make the connection, we find our common ground, then we say that we move to that next step, and I think that's how we pull them over to our side. And basically, if we can do this, we get them back to where we're at traditionally, I think.
Well, I was a latecomer to Donald Trump. I decided to vote for him about 3 weeks before the election because I was sick of the email. Anyway, the thing that Donald Trump did, whether the same thing I say about anybody, whether you love him or hate him or anything else, is voters feel he's honest. And I can say that I've been very pleasantly surprised for the most part with his presidency. I still think that he lacks a little bit of professional polish for a president. I think he's getting a whole lot better at it. But it's very rare to see somebody come in to any type of political position and actually attempt to get everything that they said done. And he's met massive resistance, and you can tell he's been learning along the way to the point of where he dusts off Mike Pence to go down and work with Congress and start getting the bills passed because he's getting resistance from Democrats, Republicans, everything else. And it's like the Republicans, it was like somebody, like he was sitting there and he's tweeted out, you know, Republicans said, give us Congress, we'll get rid of the Affordable Care Act. Give us the Senate, we'll get rid of the Affordable Care Act. Well, now we need the presidency too, and now they have all three, and they didn't expect somebody to come into office that was going to attempt to do exactly what he said. And I feel that he's going to, if they don't pass it, he's sitting there talking about primary challenges. I honestly feel, from what I've seen from him, that he'll primary challenge him. And the thing is, in 2020, the one thing he's completely earned from me is every ounce and every hour worth of work that I can give to him, because his word means something. And there is no price tag that you can put on that from any president or politician.
Perfect, awesome. Well, we're going to be closing here. And I just have one quick thing to say, and as a millennial, because Christine brought this up, we are ready to get working, and I can tell you right now that millennials are more conservative than you think. We just need people to go out there and reach out to them. So I urge you to go out to colleges, to go to the local College Republicans chapter and start talking to these kids, because we're ready to get to work, and we're ready to start changing our future and everyone's future. So thank you to all the panelists today, and that was great, so thank you for listening.
Because we lost a couple speakers this morning, we have a little extra time here, which is a real luxury, so we're going to get to know some of our sponsors and why they're here and what makes a difference. I have a couple of thoughts on that last panel. The saying is, men are from Mars and women from Venus. Talking to some of our family members, I've got a daughter who's very liberal, on not so much on the economic issues, but she's a animal rights advocate and so on. And so last night, as Lee Edwards and I were talking, I started saying, why can't we convince on the wind fight, which is huge in the thumb, we'll hear about that today. You see the birds and the bats being killed by these windmills that go at 180 miles an hour at the tips. But yet the green people, the environmental people, animal rights people are all together. But obviously they can't be together if these windmills are not producing good energy. They're not efficient. They're very expensive. But they're also killing birds. So how do we get in there and pit the bird people, the animal rights people, against the radical environmental people? We've got to look at these opportunities and figure out how to explore it. The other thought is, on April 7th of this year, a unique thing happened. The president and his wife were entertaining the premier of China and his wife. And at the time they were having dinner, the strike took place in Syria. Think about that. It's an unprecedented thing. And later on, not long after that very same day, we saw videos of all these coal ships from North Korea being turned back from China and sent back to North Korea. That's their money source. That's how that radical regime survives in Korea. There's a lot of things being played out. Trans-Pacific Partnership, that being canned. We're seeing a reordering of society across the world because of the intestinal fortitude of this guy who sometimes you think is slipping of the lip, is just laying the plan. So I'm willing to give him some rope and see where we can go with that. Bruce, why don't you introduce Lee very briefly? 2 minutes, Lee.
Okay,
Minutes here.
I got a minute and a half. I'll tell you, good morning, everybody. It's a real treat to see so many patriots that I've had the pleasure of working with to help our state and country on a number of important conservative issues. God bless all of you for what you've done for our country. I've owned and managed over the past 50 years. Very helpful. Hello. One of my hello. Thank you. One of my companies, I advise doctors in medical schools around the country for 25 years. What we're displaying today, connected to my medical consulting, and it's a real blessing. It's the best thing we've ever seen. Tremendous benefits for people, health, and we are the only ones in the world to have it. It's a recent discovery of a revolutionary health product called ACEA that's achieving amazing results for tens of thousands worldwide. This product was an enormous help to my wife, my friends, and me. It saved the lives of a number of people we know of. As a result, I feel compelled to share this with as many people as possible.
Thank you very much, Lee.
Okay.
Over, it was 5. Go ahead, John. What do we have over here with Drain the Swamp? Check. Check.
Okay, here we go. Okay, my name's Tom Backers, and I represent Drain the Swamp this weekend. This is what we do, and I'm going to play one of these for you. Hopefully it'll get the whole room. We run 8 of these radio ads. One of the things, one of the questions was, how do you reach people that aren't in this room? I know how you people are going to vote. I guarantee I know how you're going to vote. How do we reach everybody else? Radio ads.
The state government representing. This is another message from Drain the Swamp, Michigan. Our state legislature has been very busy since the proposal won defeat. They increased gasoline and vehicle taxes in spite of the resounding no vote. Passed laws exempting their government emails from the Freedom of Information Act, turned down a promised 1% reduction in the state income tax in spite of the nearly $600 million budget surplus in 2016. Now the Senate wants to give taxing and eminent domain authority away to private organizations, contractors, and even individuals. And in 2012, they rewrote the state recall laws, making it virtually impossible to fire any state government elected official. Isn't Michigan tired of this yet? This message brought to you and paid for by Drain the Swamp, Michigan. On the web at dtsmi.org, Facebook at Drain the Swamp, Michigan, and Twitter at DTSMI. Look us up and help us take our government back.
Thank you very much.
That costs $10 for one ad on one station, one time. We're here to raise some money. Please come over, visit our table, break out your checkbook, buy an ad. Thank you.
John, why don't we talk to the meter choice for Michigan people?
Hello. Hi, my name is Janine Deal. We are independent advocates for utility meter choice legislation here in Michigan. As you know, the new electronic, sometimes called smart utility meters, have multiple issues. One of them is our property rights. Our property rights have been taken away from us as far as these new utility meters. They're also a digital backdoor to our private lives and our homes. So there's homeland security and cybersecurity issues, privacy, and also these new meters are not necessarily green. They actually take energy to run. So that adds to the peak demand for energy use in summers. They have not withstood the test of time as far as longevity goes. The analog meters have been around for longer than any of us here, and they have not had any of the issues that these new electronic and smart meters have. So if you haven't been to our table, please stop by, pick up a brochure. We also have postcards. If you are in agreement with this legislation and want to retain the right to decide what kind of technology is or is not installed on your home, please fill out one of these cards with your name and address. We will stamp it and send it to your legislator, stating that you want utility meter choice legislation. We also have DVDs of the video Take Back Your Power if you're unaware of the issues with this new type of metering. The Take Back Your Power DVD will certainly inform you. So
yeah, at our house, we had 3 meters, and they gave us a choice. We had to spend about $270 plus $15 a month per meter to opt out. I mean, and they still send a meter reader to read it. So, Bruce, would you briefly introduce this next table?
Yes, Doctor.
I thought we had our technology.
Okay.
Trent is over
here. Here you go, sir.
Well, thank you very much. That was an introduction. I've practiced medicine for about 45 years. And, Ken Fisher, thank you very much. He'll be speaking later today on the health panel. Yes, and so this is my 3rd book. My first book was In Defiance of Death, The Real Cost of End-of-Life Care, and that the real cost is human suffering. I mean, that's the real cost. My second book was an electronic book, The 10 Questions that should have been asked about the Affordable Care Act that were never asked. And now this 3rd book is Understanding Healthcare Historical Perspective. I believe it's very important. I don't think this is a Republican or a Democratic issue. It's a human issue, that we have evolved into a commodity kind of healthcare where you spend very little time with the doctor. The doctor doesn't really know you as a human being anymore. So how did we get into this? So this book starts in the 1540s with the beginning of the scientific method. It then goes into the great advance of the 1800s, and then it goes into how medicine evolved in the United States, and then you get this understanding of how we got into a benefit model instead of a payment model. And I'm going to talk about more about that around 3:30. So, and then the book goes into how to fix this. How do we provide health care for everybody in this country, better care at a price we can afford? And that's through patients being in charge of their own money. So that's what this book is about, and thank you very much. Thank you, Kenneth. Freedom Works is here. They are a silver sponsor, and his literature didn't arrive, but I'm going to let Colby say something.
Thank you, thank you. My name is Colby Bledsoe. I am with Freedom Works. And first, let me just say I travel all around the country going to grassroots and conservative meetings and conventions, and this honestly is one of the better ones I've been to. So just a quick round of applause for Norm and everybody with MCU. This is a great event, so, and a great resource for everyone here. It was mentioned my material that we were going to have out did not arrive via the mail, unfortunately, but I will be around, so please come talk with me. FreedomWorks, just to hit on 3 quick points, what we do is we work to magnify your voices as activists. So we work with a lot of Tea Party groups, we work with conservative women groups, and everyone else trying to make sure that their voice is heard. We do that with 3 different main programs right now. One is issue advocacy, so we work very regularly at the state and federal level, supporting and opposing legislation and connecting you with your legislators so that they know how you feel and want them to vote. Second thing that we do is we are working on what is called the Regulatory Action Center. And what that is we are trying to make it as easy as you would call your congressman or your state legislator for you to contact these regulatory bodies, and these bureaucrats who are putting up the red tape that are costing us billions and billions of dollars every year. Connecting you with those regulatory agencies and telling them that they need to stop. And then the third piece, very quickly, is we also have a PAC side that works very closely with the House Freedom Caucus and other conservative members like Justin Amash, Jim Jordan, and a few others, just making sure that they have the support they need so they can continue to get reelected and aren't being drowned out by the establishment. So again, thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Thank you, Colby. Let's get the next panel up, please. Larry, Nick, John, come on up, please. Kevin, and this panel is going to tell you what regulation is doing to you and what you need to do to fight back. And so remember, questions are on cards, please, if you have questions, so that we can get them up here and screen them. Nick?
Good morning. I'm Nick Chiricero. I'm proud of my background, both in the military and the Tea Party. But what I'm really proud of is I'm a precinct delegate. How many people in here are precinct delegates? Outstanding. The reason I'm proud of that is I live in Troy. Troy and Oakland County went blue. My precinct, thanks to my wife and myself, we were red. We had Trump ahead in our precinct. How did that occur? It occurred by knocking on doors. So please encourage your friends to become precinct delegates and get out and knock on the doors. It's amazing how you meet your neighbors. I had one neighbor come up to me and ask me about my Trump sign on my lawn. That was back in July. And we discussed it. My neighborhood is a cul-de-sac. There is a couple there from Russia, a couple there from Poland, one man from England, a couple there from India, and I'm the Italian on that cul-de-sac. The gentleman I'm talking about was from Poland, and he started asking me about Trump and what I thought about it. I said, I think Mr. Trump is a patriot, and he will do what's right for the country. And then I asked him a question. I said, Zibby, why did you come here? He looked at me. Why did you come from Poland to the United States? And he just looked at me. I said, if you vote for Mrs. Clinton, you will get the same type government that you left to come here. Now, Zippy knew I was a precinct delegate. He knew I was also distributing signs. 2 days later, he had his own sign for Trump on the front lawn. What I can tell you is it works. If you see immigrants here that have come here, talk to them. Ask them why they came here. You're going to convert them very quickly. Okay. Second thing, I don't know how many of you have seen this on the tube. During a recent Trump stop, a heckler from the audience said, "Hey, Trump, where are you hiding your tax returns?" And Donald responded, "I found a very secure place that I'm certain they won't be found." And the heckler then said, "And where is that, dummy?" And Donald smiled and said, they're underneath Obama's college records, his passport application, his immigration status as a student, and his funding sources to pay for college, and his elective service registration. So I think you answered that one very correctly. What has that got to do with what we're here for, property rights? I just read in a book by about Thomas Jefferson, where our founding fathers have said, there is no freedom or liberty without property ownership. So with that, I'm going to turn the microphone over to John Anthony. We're going to start this panel.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Here we go. Is this little guy working? Slide up there. It says crush, how HUD crushes property rights. That should be up there. Well, while that's getting started, we're going to talk about property rights. We're going to talk about HUD. You know, since the 90s, there's been a movement in the federal government to centralize the control of local planning through Washington, D.C. And that movement has metastasized into virtually every one of the federal agencies, but we don't recognize it on the ground level because it goes by names that sound benign and friendly, like sustainable development, like complete streets, like smart growth, like land trusts, like protecting of land, and elimination of discrimination. These are all things that we like. These are good things to have. But we're going to find that there's a more nefarious movement going on here, and we need to see that. Generally, you can only see this at the 30,000-foot level. So I just told you about what's going on. So now we're going to kind of reel this down, and we're going to look at the local level, and we're also going to see what it is that we can do about it. You know, property rights are important because Justice Saunders out in Washington State said that if the right of the use of the property is denied, then your property rights have been annihilated. They have been wiped out. So before I go into HUD, I want to lay a groundwork. I want to put a foundation here and understand why these property rights are so valuable and so meaningful to us. Suppose you owned an automobile, and you paid for this cash. It's all yours. And on the way out of the showroom with your ownership of this car that you have title to, the salesman said, "Oh, I forgot to tell you, there's a new federal law that was passed that says you can only drive 35 miles a day in that brand new car." But that's okay because it's going to mitigate climate change, reduce CO2 levels, and it's going to make our nation and our environment safer. But the good thing is you get to drive that car 350 miles on Sunday, so you get to make up for it. Now you might ask yourself, you own the car, but who controls that car? That's your property. But you've lost a lot more than control of your property. You've lost something far more dear than that. Because you see now the government, through that one move, gets to decide how often you see your grandchildren who live 40 miles away. Where you're going to go shopping, where you're going to go to work, and very often what type of transportation you're going to be able to use from one place to another. In effect, I've changed your behavior. If I control your property, I control your behavior. You lose your property rights, you lose your human rights. And my friends, that is real. That's as solid and real as it gets. And that's why I'm here today. That's why I travel all over the United States talking about this very topic. Now let's come back and take a look at HUD. What does HUD have to do with your property rights? Well, there we go. The people who control land use and they control zoning laws, they have the ability to control where and how you're going to live, how much your cost, the value of your home is going to be, and even what it's going to cost to be able to operate that home. And right now, that's done locally, and that's a good thing. We have people like Chris and Christine and Tom who were up here earlier today. We had Professor Wagner who's explaining the law to us. We need to keep these things locally because they're so vitally important to us. However, in 2015, HUD passed a new regulation called Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing. Remember, I said this passion for the central control of local autonomies and local planning has metastasized through the federal government. With HUD, when they passed this regulation, they created a situation in which if you accept any one of these 4 grants, Community Development Block Grant, the Home Grant, Emergency Solutions Grants, or HOPWA grants for help with persons with AIDS,
any one of those grants. This AFFH regulation rides on top of those grants and governs what you can and cannot do with them through virtue of the application process, which I will explain. They have the ability now to, is this a pointer? Yes. They can reverse voters' decisions, they can control local zoning and land use, and force your community to join a region. All things antithetical to what we believe in this room for this evening, this morning. By using the application, when you apply to get the grant money, the federal government has the ability to broadly interpret the term discrimination, so it can cover things that you never dreamed of, such as income. If your income is higher than somebody else's, that can, in some cases, be considered discriminatory. It makes it easy to sue communities for false claims acts, for disparate impact acts, and other civil rights violations. I'm going to give you an example that happened in Rockford, Illinois, not too long ago. The town of Rockford was approached, and they were asked to put up some affordable housing by this outside developer, 69 units. The town council said, we don't want them. The voters said, we don't want the units here. And the mayor said they didn't want them. Not that they didn't dislike affordable housing. They were all for it. But the areas that they've had where they were placed in, they had severe crime problems. So they said, we just don't want to do this right now. Well, it wasn't long, and before this came in the mail to the mayor of Rockford, Illinois. That's called a compliance review. How did that get initiated? The developer who wanted to put the development up contacted HUD. HUD said, okay. They sent a compliance review down in that to the city of Rockford, and in there they threatened that there may be discriminatory zoning practices taking place, that they had failed to affirmatively further fair housing. There was going to be a complete review of their case, and if they found any civil rights violations, they were going to be referred back to the Department of Justice. At that point, Rockford, Illinois went out and hired an attorney, spent $40,000, and in the end they said, you know what, you better just go along with HUD says, it's going to be a lot cheaper. That's how we can force changing your zoning in your community through a federal regulation. Now, HUD has always had the ability to do things like this, but they've never taken these egregious steps that they are today. Now, over here, I'm going to show you how this got started. This insidious rule, AFFH, started back in 2006 when this gentleman on the left, Craig Gurian, sued the county of Westchester County under the False Claims Act. Now, he's the head of the Anti-Discrimination Center of Metropolitan New York. Sounds like a very reasonable organization. We want to eliminate discrimination. They said that when Westchester County applied for federal funds over the past few years, they were dishonest on that application. Because on the application, you have to say, we're affirmatively furthering fair housing. But Craig Gurian says, well, we don't think you are affirmatively furthering fair housing. We find all kinds of discrimination here. Therefore, we're going to sue you under the False Claims Act, and if you lose, you will pay back treble damages. In real numbers, here's what that means. Westchester County had accepted $52 million from HUD. They would have had to pay $156 million back if they lost the case. Well, they fought the case. They fought it, and HUD joined with Craig Gurian over here to settle the case. And in the end, it was decided that Westchester County had failed to affirmatively further fair housing. They were ordered to return $28 million to HUD, and they had to spend another $30 million on housing, on affordable housing. When HUD got involved, they didn't stop with what the court settlement was. They said that the county had to go beyond the four corners of that settlement. They had to build more than 750 houses of affordable houses. They had to have a court-appointed monitor come in and monitor each of the towns and have that town complete a report card that went back to HUD to decide whether or not the housing was situated the way it needed to be and whether discriminatory practices were actually being eliminated. Now, this case was settled in 2009. This is 2017, 8 years later. It's still going on. Those court-appointed monitors are still there. The regional director for HUD is still overlording those local communities. And in some cases, I'll give you an example. I happen to have the opportunity to go up into some of those communities in Westchester County. In one county, a HUD representative came in and they said, you know, we think you've got discriminatory zoning because you have this real expensive property here. And low-income families can't afford to have a single-family home on a quarter-acre of land. And the town commissioner said, well, hey, you know, we have no choice but to have larger properties because we have wells and septic systems here. And we've got laws and zoning laws that say there has to be over 150 feet between the two of them for safety and for health purposes. You know what HUD said? We don't care about your zoning laws. Get rid of the discrimination. They've expanded the meaning of discrimination in Westchester County until today that county still remains under the thumb of HUD. Now that ruling established the basis, that settlement in Westchester County established the basis of what later became affirmatively furthering fair housing. Before the ink was even dry on the court settlement back in 2009, a compliance review was issued in Marin County, a little county north of San Francisco out in California. And you'll notice the top line of that, affirmatively furthering fair housing and the precedent set by Westchester County. Yes, this is a precedent. What I described to you is not a one-off. It's not some accidental thing that isn't going to happen somewhere else. You can't say, oh, but my community is nothing like Westchester County. We're really different. If you took HUD money and you have a county and you have zoning laws, then you can fall well under any of these regulations that we're referring to right now. In Marin County, they had to agree to pass ordinances for inclusionary zoning, overcome community resistance. This is huge, overcome community resistance. Essentially, the county was told, if you have pockets of your community that don't want affordable housing where HUD decides it has to be, you have to overcome that. What you're overcoming is a thing called NIMBY. You ever heard of NIMBY? It means not in my backyard. And to Washington, D.C. speak, that's a nasty word. You don't want to be guilty of NIMBYism. Well, let me tell you what NIMBY is. NIMBY is you and me and the local residents speaking up and giving their opinion and saying this is what we want our community to look like. There's nothing wrong with NIMBY. As far as the government's concerned, if your NIMBY objects with what they want, then they don't have the control they need, so it has to be eliminated. Now, all of this is done through the application process. There's a new process when you apply for certain federal grants that I mentioned, such as the Community Development Block Grant. They used to have an older short form. Now they have a longer form that's 40 pages long, and HUD estimates takes about 200 hours to complete this. Somebody's got to pay for that 200 hours. I've spoken to communities that said it took us 400 hours to complete this. It all depends. But in this process, I'm going to shorten it here for you. You have to list, when you apply for the money, all of the potentially discriminatory areas in your community, or areas where there might be protections are necessary. For instance, you may have an area where you have racially concentrated areas of poverty, ethnically concentrated areas of poverty, areas where there's challenges with English deficiency, disabilities, disproportionate housing needs, and so forth. All these could fall under protected classification. Now that's fine, but when you list that, you then also have to list all the assets in your community, and they become things like the better schools, better jobs, transportation, parks, recreation areas, and so forth. If there's any barrier that exists between them, you must eliminate that, because to HUD, that's what they call discrimination. Those discriminatory barriers have to be taken down. As you're filling out this form and saying, okay, I might be discriminating here, I might be discriminating here, we don't want this to happen, you're going to create a plan. And as you put this plan together, you have to engage civil rights advocates, affordable housing developers, all the people in the community. Now, when we talked about Westchester County back there, who was it that sued Westchester County? It was a civil rights organization. So you're literally creating a laundry list of all the potential areas for discrimination in your community, and you're inviting the guy in that's most likely to sue your pants off to say, I want you to participate in this plan. That's how you get set up for a lawsuit. Because the minute you don't close down all those barriers, and they become insane, the extent of the barriers. HUD lists 40 of them in the application process. But they also in there say, we expect you to find more. Now there's a built-in incentive for people to sue your community. Remember that gentleman I pointed to back a little earlier, Craig Gurian? Remember that guy? The Anti-Discrimination Center of Metropolitan New York. Well, he got $7.5 million out of that lawsuit. $7.5 million. You know how many members there are in the Anti-Discrimination Center of Metropolitan New York? Well, almost. The most I could find was 2. Craig and his lovely wife, Lori. They did really well in 2009. And you can see it on their income statements in their filings. When you fill out this application to take the grant money, you're filling out a form that creates a legal liability. This statement says, the grant applicants agree to take no action materially inconsistent with our obligation to affirmatively further fair housing. Attorneys have told us that that establishes the basis for a False Claims Act lawsuit by the Department of Justice or any other private individual that chooses to sue you. And those lawsuits are taking place. A similar one happened in Baltimore last year. 3 people decided in Baltimore we weren't living in a nice enough area. We need to live somewhere that's a little bit better than that. So they complained to a civil rights organization, in this case the NAACP, who went back to HUD. HUD came back and said, well, okay, you're right. They issued a compliance review. They sued the city of Baltimore. The 3 applicants, those 3 young HUD residents, were moved into a nicer community. The city was sued and lost $30 million, but the HUD residents had got to share in a $150,000 payout. Moved into a better home, and HUD not only paid for the move, but also paid for the down payment on all the utilities and the setup costs. So when we apply for these grants, you now have to use HUD's own data to decide whether your community is discriminatory or whether it's not, where concentrated areas of poverty are, and so forth. HUD supplies you with that data. And they ask you to create a workout plan. How are we going to solve these areas of discrimination? Well, it doesn't sound like a bad thing. If we're discriminating, we kind of want to get rid of that and keep our communities safe and socially adjust for everyone. So you create this workout plan. But when you create the workout plan, you have to compare your area with the regional area. For instance, I live not far from downtown Chattanooga, Tennessee, but we have a region outside of that. It has Brantley County, McDonald, Polk Township, Polk County, and so on and so forth. If there's a concentrated area of poverty in Chattanooga, Tennessee, they can turn around and say, well, we need to move those people over here to Bradley County, 30 miles away, because it's a regional effort. So if I take my plan here in the city, and I'm able to merge it with your plan out here in the rural area, in effect, I've created a region. I've regionalized your local community. When your planning is aligned with that of the region or the local metropolitan area, you are de facto absorbed into that for planning purposes. And remember, that's what that beginning slide I showed. If I control your planning, I can control your lifestyles, I can control who lives next door to you, and so on and so forth. So this is a backdoor way of moving us into a regional program. Now, to give you an idea why we don't want to be in regions, why they're a bad thing, because very often planners will come in and they'll sell us notion of regions, and they'll say, well, gee, regions, what's wrong with that? We can have economies of scale, save on salaries, and so on and so forth. So it's going to be a good thing for your community, and we can improve parks and recreation. Well, here's an example of a regional program. This is called Plan 2040, and it's out in the Bay Area in San Francisco. And it's a magnificent plan. It involves housing, jobs, transportation, environment, financial equity. All these things are being readjusted in this region that covers 9 million people in 7 different counties. Now, that sounds like a really magnificent plan, except for this. That plan was put together by the Bay Area Council of Bay Area Governments and the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. There is an elected official on one of them. So when we talk about having local rights and why it's so necessary that we have some sort of control over what takes place, because property values can all be changed, ownership can be changed, my ability to do what I choose to with my property and travel where I want to and the mode of travel can all be altered. We have to have a local say in that. When you've got an unelected board up here, you have no local say. This is so bad right now in California that they have formed PDAs, preferred development areas. It's gotten so bad out there that they're taking people and saying, if you want to move into the city, this is where you're going to move. We're going to tell you where to go. We have Democrats and Republicans alike out there fighting these councils to try to stop this stuff, and they can't. This is what HUD pushes you into. Remember, in the application process, 70 times it talks about regions. We're talking about the imposition of regional sustainable development through HUD. It is the primary mover of regional sustainable development. Regional sustainable development What is it? Have you heard that term before? It comes out of a document called Our Common Future, written in 1987, Chapter 2. It doesn't appear before that anywhere. It's invented by a United Nations report in 1987. That's where it came from. That became operationalized over the years through different documents and became part of the President's Council on Sustainable Development in 1992 to advance sustainable development across the country using federal agencies to do that. That's a lot of territory that's covered. But that's how it metastasized from a UN idea of sustainable development into what we see happening in our communities today. So when you think of HUD, you think, well, wow, this is going to eliminate discrimination, help us eliminate poverty. Well, yeah, that's ostensibly what it's supposed to be doing. But there's a whole underlying agenda here that we need to be paying close attention to. That's why we're here today. Now, it's rather deceptive when you look at HUD, if you try to see where their regulations are. If you go to the Federal Register and you look up affirmatively furthering fair housing, it has this very comforting statement there. It says this rule does not impose any land use or zoning laws on any government. Well, wow. I mean, if that's the case, I wouldn't be here right now. I'd be back somewhere having a beer this afternoon and enjoying myself, probably somewhere in downtown Lansing. But if you read in the Federal Register, if you go 2 paragraphs further, here's what it says. HUD will assist recipients to adjust their land use and zoning laws to meet their legal obligations to affirmatively further fair housing. So what did they say? We're not going to force it on you, right? This rule does not impose, we don't impose any land use. We put you in a position where you have to do it yourself or end up getting your pantsuit off. That's what we're going to do. That's how HUD manages to accomplish this, and that's also how HUD manages to look you straight in the eye with a straight face and say, we're not going to impose any land use on your community. It's going to be just fine over there. When politicians don't read the legislation, when they don't read the material, when they don't look at the bills that are passed before them, when they don't read the Federal Register and find out what's in there, they don't know any of this. And when somebody says, what's going on, they give them a book and say, oh, hey, right here. No problem, Joe. You can listen to that because it says this rule doesn't impose any land use or zoning laws restrictions. Okay, we don't have to worry about that now, do we? Whoever said we have to read the bill, pass it to read it, now you know why they do that. Let's take a look at HUD's mission statement. Because if you think their primary mission of HUD is to help eliminate poverty and to pull people, to eliminate discrimination, you're wrong. It's not. In practice, it's not. In verbiage, it is. But in practice, it is not. If it was, poverty would have been gone a long time ago. HUD's mission statement says our mission is to create strong, sustainable, inclusive communities and quality, affordable housing for all. That's the first sentence. We're talking about strong communities. I think we have people in the audience who know all about strong cities and strong communities here. They're very familiar with that. We're talking about sustainable communities and inclusive communities. Well, inclusive communities, that's a good thing. But what's inclusive? What does that mean? Do you know that in that Westchester case that I talked about a few minutes ago, HUD tried to prove that Westchester County was guilty of discrimination. They tried mightily to prove that. But in the end, the judge said there was no discrimination here. They tried so hard that HUD began by saying, well, we think you have discriminatory planning practices, but they couldn't prove it. So that went off the table. We didn't talk about that anymore. Then they tried to say that they had exclusionary zoning, but they couldn't prove there was exclusionary zoning. So finally, HUD got them. You know how they got them? They got them because they said that low-income families can't afford to live up there in Westchester County. Well, I'm not exactly low income. I can't afford to live in Westchester County either. Did you know who lives there? Yeah. Hillary Clinton lives in Westchester County. Bill Clinton lives up there. George Soros lives in Westchester County. These are like seriously nice homes in Westchester County. But that was considered discriminatory. So that's how they finally got it on exclusionary zoning based on socioeconomic disparities. HUD is in the business of creating regional sustainable development, and they do it by enforcing the application process when you apply for the grant money for the 4 grants that I just mentioned to you earlier today. If we go on with the mission statement, HUD is working to utilize housing as a platform for improving the quality of life. So we're no longer talking about the end game, let's eliminate discrimination. We're talking about housing as a platform to go off into all kinds of variant areas that you never dreamed of, including things like socioeconomic diversity of classrooms and religious desegregation. So I'm going to tear those down a little bit, and we're going to begin to look at those in just a moment. We're also going to look at what we can do about this. And then finally, our mission is to build inclusive, sustainable communities free from discrimination and transform the way that HUD does business. Well, I'm glad that free from discrimination finally got in there somewhere. The problem is HUD gets to describe discrimination in virtually any way they want to. So we can call discrimination if I make $50,000 a year and I can only afford to live this way, and a friend of mine makes $250,000 and she can live in a really fancy way, well, technically to HUD that could be considered discriminatory. So what we're going to do is we're going to have solutions to this. We're going to have ways to solve that discrimination. But notice the emphasis on this: sustainable communities, sustainability, transformation. Notice that, because the drive behind HUD today is to develop sustainable communities and to develop and then to move those into regions. And those are the pieces that we're trying to pull away from HUD right now. HUD is the federal government's legal enforcement arm for regional sustainable development. Legal because it has the threat of law behind it. Remember, the driving force, go back to slide number 1, the driving force in the government today is to get centralized planning and take it away from local authorities. That way we can have a more uniform, a more fair, a more streamlined economy if we can just control it at the central level. I've got 11 minutes left on this. How did I get down to 5? Okay. All right. Well, 5 minutes? Here we go. The way that we responded to this are communities create barriers to upward mobility. They say that communities are barriers to upward mobility. So they create urban sprawl, zoning laws, land use. All of these lot sizes, affluent areas, are all examples of discriminatory practices. So this is why you can't win in a game where you get to change the rules on a continuing basis. HUD's solution is to move people to opportunity. Move to opportunity means I take people from low-income zip codes and I move them to better-income zip codes. And statistically, in the 90s, when this was tried, it was an utter failure. So what HUD has done is to get back, by micro-studying the data, they found areas where it was successful. And a guy named Raj Chatty from, I think it's Stanford University, had created a report and said, no, this stuff works. Well, no, it doesn't work. It only works in specific instances, but they've now haloed that across the whole universe of what HUD wants to do with move to opportunity. So you're going to see that begin to appear in more and more of their programs. Small area fair market rents moves people from low-income areas into high-income areas. And if these voucher holders don't want to move, it's real simple. They just lower the amount of the voucher that you're getting in the area where you live, and they force you to move. If you want the amount of voucher money you were getting, then you're going to have to move to a nice area where we'll give you even more. It's complete control. Classroom socioeconomic diversity. HUD formed regional equity assistance centers with the purpose of teaching local people, local educational leaders, how to begin to diversify their classrooms, not based on educational prowess, but based on income diversity to create equality across the classroom. I'm going to have to skip some of this and move forward. So what about states' rights? Don't we have a 10th Amendment? Don't we have rights to, our Constitution has rights? Well, let me tell you what happened to states' rights. We have dwindled most of them away because we sold them off for grant money. We took the stimulus package. You remember a thing called Common Core? 42 states had signed on for Common Core. Well, how did that happen? Because if they didn't sign on for Common Core, they didn't get the stimulus money. It's that simple. And now we've gone on to Title I funds, and through community development block grants, through organizations like HUD, challenge grant programs, through federal agencies like EPA. These programs all have strings attached in which the federal government has given up certain states' rights, rather, have been surrendered in order to get the money. This is what's happening locally right now. We're going into local communities. We're getting mayors to sign off on documents that essentially surrender their local rights to the federal government. So the solution to this, I'm going to rock forward here a little bit. When the Westchester case was decided, the judge quoted a statement from Chief Justice Roberts. They make the assumption that if your community is taking $100,000 or $1 million or $20 million, that you read the document that gave you the money. I mean, that would make sense. It'd be like buying a house without knowing how much the interest rate's going to be on it. They assume you read the document. And therefore, since you read the document, he makes it clear. If a party objects to a condition on the receipt of federal funding, its recourse is to decline the funds. We need to find ways to decline the funds. And I can tell you, we are finding ways to decline those funds. In communities out in Colorado that I'm working with right now, they're finding ways to get where communities can raise their own money and actually raise more money than they were going to get from HUD, and they don't have to be reliant upon them. HUD is a tremendous asset. It's a tremendous tool in our communities. Let's use it as a resource. Let's not use it as a lifeline to continue our financial solvency in our communities. And that's what's happening in many of them. So we need to find better ways to be able to fund our own projects in our communities. We need to realize that the only way we're going to end this is within the substructure of HUD itself. We have to get into the guts, the very sub rosa workings of the organization itself, because there's people who want to continue these programs no matter who's the President of the United States. So we have to focus on the internal workings of HUD, and we have people who are doing that right now, by the way, I'm happy to say. And we also have to be looking in the tips of the organization, which is in the communities. We need more community leaders who are educated and know what's going on. My heart went out to Christine when she sat over here this morning and said, well, I'm there, but I'm an elected official, but there's not much I can get done because I'm bucking all these people over here voting against me, even fellow Republicans. You've got to join Christina. She cannot be the only one. So whoever's in here who wants to stand up and take public office, for heaven's sakes, we desperately need good people in there. I know good people. I don't know where I'm at here. My clock's not matching your guys' clock. But I know people who've gone into public office specifically to stop what some of these agency events that I'm talking about up here. And they ended up in tears because they had 5 other Republicans on there all voting for more and more grant money to come in. We've got to replace those people and get good, solid Republicans in office who know what they're doing. I have a website. It's called sustainablefreedomlab.org. I've tried to just jam-pack that stuff with information. If you want to hear what I'm talking about what we talked about here today, go to that website. There's a little red toolbox on the right. It doesn't cost a nickel. Just click on that thing and it'll take you to a breakdown of all the things that are going on. I think federal agencies are a wonderful entity in America. We need federal agencies to help us, but we need the right people running them, and we need people in there who understand that people's rights come first. The rights of the community matter far more than the rights of the federal government of the United States of America. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your time.
Our next speaker this morning is Lori Green. She has authored a property rights task force report.
Well, I'm just a regular person, grew up in a small farming community, the one I still live in. I'm a former teacher, and what got me into this is everywhere I turned, I felt my property rights were being trampled upon. I got on the planning commission in my township, same thing. I got more and more involved. Approximately a year ago, Norm Hughes assembled a group of property rights lovers, which wasn't hard to find from a group like this. I joined that group, and we met in Lansing last summer, and we set to work defining the problems of what's going on here in Michigan. Much of what you heard Mr. Lincoln say is what we found all over the place. There are so many assaults on our property rights that are real personal and intellectual. The task was somewhat daunting. We spent some meetings really just discussing where we were going to go with this project we had started. So what I'd like to do is kind of highlight some of the things we talked about to begin with. So maybe it's a teacher in me, but there's going to be a quiz later. What do these pictures have in common? So let's kind of go through them. Do you want to switch slides for me when I get that? This is a picture of what's going on in Kent County and all of the state and the nation. But farmland preservation is a part of regional planning. We've heard that regional planning description already. But master plans say things like farmland should remain farmland. You can find this in master plan after master plan after master plan that come from the regional planners that get into our local communities, right down to our townships. Township officials buy into this. They don't really know what they're doing in most cases. But this family here is the first family that got into the farmland preservation in Kent County. And you might ask, why would a farmer do that? I'm a farmer. I grow asparagus. Why would a farmer do that? I personally wouldn't. But these people here received $4,172 per acre for 106 acres. That, my folks, is a total of $442,232. They still get the farm, but they sell their development rights. So, why do farmers do this? Farms get big, they get expensive to run, kids don't want to run them anymore. They're very much enticed to sell those rights. But that's a loss of property rights. This slide just blows my mind. This slide shows cases where sustainable living is really not about sustainable living, it's about control. Top left, Jim Nygaard, now he's in Minnesota. He put up this wind turbine, you can see it there behind him. It's barely taller than his house. It's 29 feet. His neighbor did not like that wind turbine, complained. The city decided he needed to take it down. He attempted to work with the city. Of course, that didn't work out so well. He ended up taking it down. He could not remove the entire base because it was attached to his house. It was destroying his foundation as he took it out. They put him in jail, gave him a big fine. The way he got out of jail is his wife and kids found some people to help them remove the base. So, sustainable living, not so much. Just below that, bottom left, Julie Bass of Oak Park, Michigan. In the time when Michelle Obama was planting a vegetable garden in her front yard, this woman decided to join in with that movement. In Oak Park, she planted a vegetable garden in her front yard, found out you can't grow vegetables in your front yard. Zoning ordinances there don't allow for that. She was made to remove those vegetables. Top right, and this one really bothers me. Gary Harrington in Oregon, these 3 reservoirs, he was collecting rainwater. He owns something like 107 acres, I believe. He was put in jail and fined for collecting rainwater. And the reason, he was told the rainwater wasn't able to reach the river, so he was taking the people's water. The people's water. Where does that come from? If you go in, I went down a rabbit hole on that one for quite a time, looking up all kinds of water issues. And all across the world, you hear international code, people's water. There's some very disturbing things that are happening in Australia, but you can really delve into that one if that interests you. But yeah, you can't collect rainwater on your own property in Oregon at this point in time. The people on the bottom right, these people are from Cedar, Michigan. So they decided they wanted to live a sustainable life. They wanted to live off the grid in a very small house. They built this house. It is 12 by 16 square feet, so it's 12 by 16. And it's off the grid. They have a solar panel. They have a septic system. They're not connected to city water. And they discovered that ordinances don't allow for that. You have in Cedar, Michigan, you have to be connected to the city services. And besides that, the house is too small. You're not allowed to live in a house that small. So, is this sustainable movement really about sustainable living, or is it about control? I think we can see the answer quite easily. These people are in Van Buren County, and they discovered that when you buy a distressed property and fix it up and get a horse and a cow and some chickens and some ducks, well, even though it fits the zoning ordinance, which they followed implicitly, that it came out in court that was the township admitted to it, if the neighbors complain, zoning can change. So they went through a lengthy court battle. They ended up actually winning, but they spent a lot of money and had a lot of grief doing it. And that also is in Michigan, Van Buren County. This is a topic that I have spent years studying. This is a map of a drain district and what's going on with drainage districts and drain code in Michigan. Michigan is essentially a swamp. And in the early 1900s, it was drained and the land made farmable and livable with a series of ditches. So in the county I live in, there are 106 of these ditches. And since the early 1900s, Michigan drain code has been constantly changing legislatively. The current drain code was written in 1956. But the key here is it gets changed several times a year in tiny little ways that are actually very large ways. Drain commissioners have sole power to decide what land belongs in a drain district or not, who pays for work and how much, what work gets completed. Drain commissioners get to assess for this work. They get to tell you what you will pay, what work you will pay for, whether or not your land is in a drain district, and they do all this without a vote. Taxation without representation, if you ask me. It used to be that drain districts followed property lines. You see the orange up there, those are the property lines. Now drain districts, so-called, follow contour lines. But if you look at that particular map, you will see straight lines. I don't know too many contour lines that make straight lines. Besides, hiking is one of my things I like to do. When I look at a topographic map, I don't see straight lines like that. So what's really going on here? I think the key is the statement here in bold. I ran across an MiCPAC report that's called Sustaining Michigan's Waters, and in that report it says that Michigan Drain Code will be changed legislatively so they can implement what they wish. So here we see what's going on with that. I believe that statement's really the key. We have an expert that's going to talk about wind turbines, so I'm going to kind of skip that over for the sake of time. And next slide. We also have an expert that's going to talk about toast. One thing I just want to, if I go back to toast for a second, one thing I'd just like to say about this is in the top right, besides all the health department regulations, some cities are adopting toast regulations for their city sidewalk. In some cities, you cannot sell your property unless you fix the city sidewalk. The city owns the sidewalk, not you. But you can't sell the property unless you fix it. So toast regulations are time of sale or transfer, and they're getting larger and larger, more spread out. So, next slide. You can probably answer this question now. What do these pictures have in common? And next slide, what can we do about it? And why is this happening? We've already heard from John Anthony here that local governments listen to regional planners. These regional planners are ultimately connected to international organizations that are pushing international code and Agenda 21. So what can we do about it? We can get involved. Start locally, educate yourself, educate others, run for office. If you cannot find somebody principled enough to run yourself. It's imperative. Our property rights are what makes us who we are. It's important that we hold on to them and gain them back. I personally feel it's the most important issue we need to tackle. Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is Kevin Mortis, who's a senior policy fellow at the Energy and Environmental Legal Institute in Washington, D.C., and founding director of the Interstate Informed Citizens Coalition. Kevin? Thank you so much. It's a privilege to be here with my brothers and sisters in faith and liberty. I'm going to talk really fast because this is a 40-minute presentation and we do it in 6 or 7 today. So be prepared to take a sip out of a fire hose. So you see my credentials. I helped found the Interstate Informed Citizens Coalition. I was a planning commission member who was faced with wind development, which caused us to start the process that got me where I am today 9 years later. I also have a history degree from the University of Michigan. Of course, the Unabomber also has a degree from the University of Michigan. There's a number of myths that have been used to start to trample our property rights in rural townships, and you're all listening now, aren't you? About renewable energy, and I'd like to share a few of those, and then I'll get into the land use issues with specificity. But the first myth is this. Now, you probably didn't expect to see her here today, but she said Michigan is the Saudi Arabia of wind, and that same statement has been made in about 25 states across the country. Well, it can't be true everywhere. Well, if you take a look at the National Renewable Energy Lab's wind maps, you can see quickly that Iowa's worst wind is our best wind. What that means in practice, that every turbine you stick in the ground in the state of Michigan would produce twice as much electricity just by sticking it in a really good wind resource. So it makes absolutely no sense, unless you're a regulated utility like Detroit Edison. If they build a 100 megawatt wind project, their regulated rate of return over 20 years is $120 million plus $80 million of receipts from the production tax credit. So when you hear somebody say Big Fossil hates wind, the truth is Big Fossil loves wind. Senator Seitz in Ohio told the wind lobby one time, our utilities would pay Boy Scouts to rub sticks together to make electricity if they could pass all the charges onto the ratepayers and have a guaranteed rate of return. This advance, not advance. The wind lobby appears to have gotten to us. There we go. So, and the MPSC boasts about how our wind energy prices get cheaper and cheaper. And you can see we're zeroed in around $50 or so as of 2015. But if you look at wind projects coming out of the really windy regions, it may be hard to read, but they're about $17 or $20 a megawatt hour. So we're 2.5 times the price of places where the wind is really good. This is after a roughly $30 megawatt hour subsidy. Now, for a point of reference, which must be the next slide, the wholesale value of electricity is only $25. So the federal subsidies are roughly equal to the wholesale value of electricity. So myth number 2. Larry Ward, if you hear of the Michigan Conservative Energy Forum, I've taken to calling them the Crony Energy Forum because there's nothing conservative about them with respect to renewables. He advances the same lie that the wind lobby advances. The prices for renewable energy like solar and wind have consistently plummeted in recent years. It's just not true. Here's the published data from the state of Michigan on our power purchase agreement prices. We've been range bound from 2011 to 2016. Within the same narrow band. They were very expensive. I think the learning curve there was the Public Service Commission's naivete about regulating wind because nobody in the United States was selling wind for as much as the regulated utilities were getting away with selling it here for. And you can see, just in the last year, wind has jumped up sharply. There's my slide that I put in the wrong spot. Here's a map of all the wind power purchase agreements in the United States, a chart. The purple line is the very windy regions. You can see at $40 came up a little and it's down now near 20. The red line is Michigan. So you can see the red line at the top, the wind projects that we approved at $110 a megawatt hour were the most expensive ever approved in the United States. Secondly, if you take a look at the line on the right end where it jumped sharply up, we are now at $60, the most expensive place in the United States with a wind contract, at least among all the published power purchase agreements that we see. Myth 3. All kinds of environmental groups and phony conservative groups are advancing wind now, but they like to talk about CO2 and they say, you know, by shifting to renewable sources, we can radically reduce CO2 emissions in the United States. Now, my group is bipartisan. Some people are very concerned about CO2, others are not. It turns out, if you look at the science, it doesn't much matter. Consider these cavemen. They're sitting there talking to each other. Something's just not right. Our air is clean. Our water is pure. We all get plenty of exercise. Everything we eat is organic and free range, and yet nobody lives past 30. You got to scratch your head for a minute. President Obama put forth his Clean Power Plan. MISO, our grid operator, did an analysis of the 5 steps. If you're concerned about CO2, the bad news is MISO says it costs $237 a ton to reduce CO2 emissions with wind and MISO. The social cost of carbon, according to liberal estimates, is $40 to $60. Which is why even James Hansen says, suggesting that renewables will let us phase rapidly off fossil fuels in the United States, China, India, etc., is roughly equivalent to believing in the Easter Bunny and Tooth Fairy. Yet our conservative legislature just passed a 5% increase in renewable energy mandate. Myth 4. Wind is popular in our rural Michigan communities. This lady said this in a Senate hearing just before me, which of course put me totally off script. Every major development in the state of Michigan has been met with protests, political action. Talk about turning over trustee boards. In the last election in Sanilac and Tuscola County, we took control of 4 trustee boards over the wind issue. Consider the Garden Peninsula. This project is constructed by Marty Legina. If you watch the Curse of Oak Island reality TV show, that's him. He built 14 turbines up there. 73 people signed a petition. Says the noise driving us nuts. Take a look in Sanilac County. They built 2 townships full of turbines. That's why all the other ones turned red. If you build a wind project in one township, you've almost guaranteed the fact that your neighbors are going to look at that and say, we don't want that. Same thing in Tuscola. The 3 green stars, again, have existing operating projects. The red ones zoned them out. Right now, Elmer and Ellington are being sued by NextEra Energy Resources, a self-proclaimed world's most ethical company. Take a look at it. The yellow one I point out because Consumers Energy has a project there. And they've said, this is great, we're going to get another project in the ground. Most of their trustees have leases with Consumers Energy. The places in Michigan where wind is built is primarily where the wind company has leased the majority of their policymakers. In Fairgrove Township, 9 out of 13 elected and appointed officials had wind leases, and their township attorney is also the treasurer and signs his own checks. Every time wind has gone on a township level ballot, it's lost. Huron County now has leaseholders who are trustees who are now openly fighting any more wind development. They have more turbines in Huron County than the entire state of Ohio. In fact, these trustees said, we feel that Huron County has done our part, we don't want any more turbines. It's so bad in the political battle there that the president of DTE Energy is saying, please give us just one more project and we promise we won't do this to you again. That's a pathetic position. Now let me go very quickly now. This is what a 476-foot turbine looks like 1,100 feet from your home. When that turbine went into operation, my friends there who spent $50,000 of their own money fighting it in court had to move into their basement. They ultimately sold their house with a 35% loss. He's now on their planning commission in Mason County. Not much to worry about here. They're only as tall as the Mackinac Bridge. Let's say you hate nuclear, you can replace it with wind. Sure, 2 turbines every square mile from Toledo to Detroit to Ann Arbor, and still 1,000 megawatts of gas-fired generation because the wind doesn't blow in July and August. Put in another perspective, 1 township full of wind turbines like this makes the same energy as 1 or 2 of these gas-fired turbines that you can put inside a dairy barn. 40% wind would require 3,600 square miles of turbines and a cost of $35 billion. Yet the wind lobby tells our legislature we could easily get to 40% wind. You can hardly tell they're there. I mean, I'm going to run out of time, but this is the land use point. what the wind development companies demand is setbacks from the turbine to the neighboring house, even if that house is not leased into the project, rather than the property line. I coined a phrase for that, it's called trespass zoning. That's what they prefer. They got a published 1,320-foot safety zone in their own manufacturer's manual. They want that zone to come to your bedroom window, even though you lose that substantial semicircle for future development of your own. When you ask them to put it back to the property line where it certainly belongs, they scream that's exclusionary, they threaten to sue, we support it in the zoning referendum process, and they cancel their leases and leave. Bottom line is, wind development depends on uncompensated nuisance and safety easements that they be granted by the fiat power of zoning across unleased property for it to move forward. That's a hidden subsidy that's fundamentally unjust and unethical. Here's a real-life example, maybe hard to see. This is a wind map from Exelon from Chicago. The green parcels are leased, the gray parcels are not. Now I'm going to zoom into the gray farm in the bottom. You can see the setback circles cover more than 50% of his ground. That easement was stripped from him by force of law and donated to the neighbor, not even the neighbor, but the neighbor's tenant, because they just rent the ground for 20 years. We all believe in private property rights, but Oliver Wendell Holmes said the right to swing my fist ends where the other man's nose begins. My statement is, if my development project requires me to repeatedly punch you in the nose, I should first get your consent and then compensate you for your broken nose. The express goal of zoning regulations, local control zoning, is to separate conflicting uses of land, but you can't separate it if the nuisance part is allowed to be measured at your bedroom window. It's not reasonable. Wrapping it all up. Here's my little quick one-paragraph statement about how much sense wind energy makes, with apologies to my two sons. Mandating wind energy is like hiring one of my teenage sons to work in my construction business. They are seldom there when there's real work to be done. When they do show up, they have a highly inflated opinion of their relative contribution to the task at hand. Nevertheless, they demand to be paid far more than their adult co-workers for their juvenile efforts. And they then reward you by keeping you up all night with incessant and annoying noise that you are absolutely powerless to stop. This may be why my children don't speak to me. By the way, all these things were shared multiple times in both House and Senate Energy Committees. The chairman agreed with me privately and publicly on all these matters, and when push came to shove, they increased the mandate from 10% to 15% and instituted a 35% renewable energy goal, despite the fact that Michigan is an outrageously expensive place to generate wind energy. So, I can't win this alone. I've been fighting, not alone, but there's 100 paid lobbyists in Lansing working on energy issues. They always ask me who funds me. I'm not funded at all. I tell people I'm funded by organized labor because my wife's a union nurse at the University of Michigan Hospital, and that's how I'm funded. We need more voices. We need more help. Gary Glenn is going to advance a bill at some point to strip out the renewable portfolio standard. We're going to take a lot of support to get that done because the utilities are making a fortune on this. Join my email list. Follow the IICC on Facebook. If you get on our email list, we'll send out calls for action. If you hear of a wind project anywhere in your community or zoning amendments that are coming up to facilitate that, call me. I would be glad to come to your community and speak. We help people enact free market zoning regulations all across the Midwest. And that's all I have to say. Thanks so much.
Okay, and finally we have Larry Bass. He's going to talk to us about fighting cost regulations used by the health departments to stop sales.
Everybody hear me? You know who the country boy is because I do not have a PowerPoint presentation. I'll do mine the old-fashioned way. And Christine Barnes and Laura gave me a pretty good lead-in to the toast issues. When I talk about toast-type regulations, I'm reminded of my favorite Reagan quote. The 9 most feared words in the English language are, I'm from the government, I'm here to help. TOAST is an acronym for time of sale or transfer. Other names for regulations of this type are POS, point of sale, TOS, time of sale, or mortgage evaluation. If you read one of them, you've read them all. They had a pretty good template. 10 to 11 of the 83 counties in Michigan have these types of regulations. Now, before I go any further, how many people here go to your county commission meetings religiously? How many go to your township meetings religiously? I would suggest more of you should start going. Because I had the good fortune of working with Norm on the Freedom to Work Coalition. I was a founding member and executive board member currently of 2 Tea Parties, and I'm the secretary of the Berry County Republican Party. About 3 years ago, I was asked by the chairman of our party to get into issues of toast. My first response was, what's toast? I'd never heard of it. I found I was very embarrassed because I was looking primarily at state and national levels. And it taught me a lesson that where does government start? Starts at the local level, doesn't it? These regulations have negated rural property owners' dominion over their own property. In essence, they've transferred the deeds from your register of deeds to your local health department's control. And this primarily applies if you've got an on-site well or septic system. Now I'm going to talk specifically about the TOAST program that is in effect in Berry and Eaton counties, which we have a merged health department. Okay, now remember Christine talked about realtors reaping some benefits from this program? Up until January of this year, guess what the professions of the Berry County Board of Commissioners was in the Eaton County Board of Commissioners? They're both realtors. So we've had a very difficult time making any inroads into this, getting these programs at least reduced to a voluntary level. Our regulation was passed in late 2007 after being approved by both boards of commissioners and subsequently the Board of Health. We already had in effect in the 2 counties a sanitary regulation and a nuisance regulation that dealt with septic and well issues. That was already covered. There was no baseline study performed to indicate that such an invasive regulation was needed. The stated purpose of this regulation is to, and I quote, to protect the quality of water resources and protect the public health by providing an evaluation and maintenance program for on-site septic and water systems. That's good. The first stated means of accomplishing the purpose is regulating the sale or transfer of parcels containing on-site systems. So 2 minutes, well, that's a fast 2 minutes. Okay, I'll go quickly. Since it's passed, we've had 11,500 inspections in the 2 counties. The average cost of that inspection is $400. So you can see the impact it's had on the rural residents of those counties. Inspections are not performed by the health department. They've got registry evaluators, so in essence they put another level of control into these inspections. They're invasive. Not only do they come and they check the condition of your septic tank, your well, but they go into your house. If you've got a finished basement, you have to take some walls or ceilings down so they can ensure themselves that all your drainage goes into your septic system, with the exception of the water softener. They'll check to see your drain fields are functioning. How deep's your well? God forbid you've got a 2-inch well, because they'll make you tear it up. And my favorite, what type of furnace do you have? Now, what that has to do with quality of water or contamination, I don't know. If you don't grant access, you're subject to a $200 per day fine and up to 90 days in jail. Personally, I've heard 3 threats to condemn property if compliance isn't given to the health department. Now, if the sale is not authorized and you need repairs, you can establish an escrow account of 150% of the highest estimate, not the lowest estimate, the highest estimate. Any guesses on who manages that escrow account? The health department. And guess what? They charge you $83 for doing that. Is that an English minute or a Mystic minute? If your septic system or wells legitimately are required to be replaced or repaired, you still have to purchase a permit. The failure notices do not constitute a permit. The reason being, as it was stated by the health officer, is because we have anticipated revenues that are generated by permits as a result of TOAST that are now part of our budgetary process. If you want to appeal, it's going to cost you $300. Guess who handles the appeal? The health director and 2 members of the health board. Interestingly, 2 of the anticipated outcomes of the adoption of this regulation is number 1, and you've heard this before today, developing a database for regional and statewide planning and control. Number 2, it's a jobs bill. It's going to increase demand for excavators, plumbers, sewage haulers, well drillers, electricians, etc., etc., etc. Since it's been instituted, both farm bureaus of the 2 counties, the Veterans Group and the Berry County Republican Party have all passed resolutions and presented them to the various boards of commissioners demanding a minimum of reducing this regulation to a voluntary contract between buyer and seller. Oh, by the way, if you pass the evaluation, guess how long the evaluation is good for? 3 years. And then you have to go through the entire process again. Thank you very much.
Okay, we have a few questions here. Oh, John's got a bunch of them. Not gonna have time? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, one quick question for Kevin, one quick answer. Kevin, 2007, our state legislators were told that they'd cap our electric choice in Michigan to 10%, that DTE and Consumer Power would build more power plants in this state. It's a ball-faced lie. Should we have choice in Michigan like Ohio and Indiana?
That's not my main topic.
I understand.
With the legislature last time, which is why we got the RPS, because they were held back. We eliminated the last 10% of retail choice. And so I've had to stay away from that issue completely, because you're hard enough to hold a constituency together just on the RPS issue. But I'm in favor of anything that reduces the political clout and influence of our 2 monopolies.
And reduce our electric costs in the state of Michigan. Thank you.
I have one question for John, and then we're gonna have to call. We got another speaker.
Can you turn me on? Pick one.
Yeah, okay, I'll take this one. It's right here. What does HUD define as sustainable development, and where do they get the statutory authority to do all that stuff? Wow, let me make it fast. They don't define sustainable development. Sustainable development to HUD is normal development that eliminates discrimination between different classes by protecting us all from climate change equally. So if you take a look at HUD, the latest regulation that was passed, the latest executive order that came down prior to President Trump taking over, brought climate change into the planning process. And sustainable development, I'm not going to go into how it did that, that'll take too long, but it brought climate change into local planning. And if you don't do it, you can lose the money. And climate change, sustainable development is a response to climate change. So that's how the word sustainable gets in there. And where do they get the statutory authority? By eliminating discrimination. Remember, HUD's made everything discrimination or civil rights violation. So that's how they justify it.
Thank you for a great panel. Appreciate it very much. We have with us John Gibbs, a young man who we think is going to end up in a policy position in HUD. We're working on that. And he's got his bachelor's from Stanford in computer science, worked in Silicon Valley, took a few years and did missionary work in Japan, got his master's from Harvard, and he's one of our local activists, one of the newer members of MCU. John, give us some.
Thank you, Norm, for the introduction, and thank you for having me. It's really good to be here, a like-minded company. I'm glad there's an organization like MCU, so I just feel really energized being around what I call my family here with you guys. However, speaking of who's here with us, there is a certain group that you won't see here so much, and that's black people like me. I have a couple of folks here I see, but generally speaking, you don't see very many black people or minorities in general at conservative or Republican gatherings. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that and my experience with that and how I see that. The numbers are so bad that if we had 100 black people in this right now, only about 5 would be on our side. It's a very small number, just about 5 out of 100. So I think we really have to reflect on that and say, is there anything we can do that can perhaps increase that number, get more folks on our side? I, of course, be one of those 5 people. That's why I'm here. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about how that came to be, but before, I want to go into some background. The Democratic Party has really got quite a strong grip on the mentality and the psyche of many black folks, unfortunately. It's so bad that I was once called a white supremacist terrorist. You can imagine that, for defending a certain Republican congressman. It was really quite an experience. I took a screenshot of it, though, and I saved it. So it was kind of a badge of honor for me, but that's really how bad certain things get. I also had a certain friend who was also black tell me, hey, John, those Republicans are all racist. I said, no, that's categorically false. I go to the GOP meetings, I go to the Tea Party meetings, I've got many friends that are Republican. I know there's some amount of experience, so I know that you're wrong. And his response was, oh, you don't still know them well enough yet, that's all. Oh, really? So you have no experience with Republicans or anything, but you're trying to tell me about the character of the people. That doesn't make sense. I know you don't. But he didn't care. The image in his head was just so strong that, Republicans are just all a bunch of racist folks, and if they're nice to you, they just start hiding it. That's the mentality that's out there among many people, unfortunately. There's also another aspect to this, which is people not voting in their own interest. So a recent Pew Research poll found that 30% of black people self-identify as conservative. 30%, that's 1/3. But yet, most still vote Democratic at the end of the day anyway. Like my father. We never disagree, even though he's a staunch Democrat. Why? Because we believe pretty much the same thing. He's conservative. But at the end of the day, he'll go, I was born 2 things, and I'll die 2 things. A Baptist and a Democrat. I said, Dad, you're a JFK Democrat. The party left you a long time ago. He goes, I know, but I don't care. I got to stay loyal to the party. They don't represent anything he stands for anymore, but he just doesn't really care about it. So it's a sad phenomenon. Sometimes it seems like an uphill battle. One of the other things people often say is you've forgotten where you've come from if they know that you're Republican. They'll say that you think you're better than them and you don't know your roots and all this kind of stuff. But actually, I do know my roots for our family, and that's why I'm a conservative. My grandparents, if we go back far enough, they were sharecroppers in the South. They had no shoes, no plumbing. They did not know how to read and write. They grew up in poverty. Now fast forward to our generation. Both my sisters and myself not only know how to read and write, we all have master's degrees. We have shoes. We have indoor plumbing. We have cars. We have all that good stuff. And how that happened? Capitalism, I think, is the best explanation. When you have people competing against each other to make the best product for the lowest prices, the people get better stuff for low prices. That's how today we have shoes where if you look at pictures from the 1930s, very few people were wearing shoes. They're all barefoot. That's why I have a lot of respect for our capitalist system. And although our party is not perfect all the time, we have some folks who are not conservative on our side, unfortunately, we are the best on the area of capitalism compared to the Democratic side. That's one of the strong reasons I tend to not be a Democrat and I am on the conservative side. Another thing I don't like about the Democratic Party is their tendency to blame problems in the black community exclusively on racism. So one of the sad statistics that we see out there is about 3 out of 4 black kids are born to unmarried parents. This is a huge tragedy because all the studies show that kids born to stable 2-parent homes have better outcomes in every area. They have better graduation rates, lower chance of going into crime, all that kind of stuff. Now, is this caused by racism, as the other side would like me to believe? I say categorically no. How do I know this? Go back to 1960, when racism was higher than it is today, and about 90% of black kids were born to married parents. So how do they explain that? They don't talk about it so much. They're really focused on blaming racism as the end-all solution to all these issues, and I have a problem with that. I have a story to tell you here briefly. There's a friend of mine who's volunteering with black single mothers, and she's really doing great work with them. And the nature of the welfare handouts are such that, unfortunately, for a single mother, if you have another kid as a single mother, you get more benefits. So one of the young ladies told her, all I have to do is have 4 kids and I'll be set for life. It's a very sad mentality that's out there, and the Democratic Party has really nurtured this mentality. It seems to me, instead of focusing on how to bring the family back together, they're really focused on blaming and attacking. They're not really looking at how do we uplift and bring families together. I really have a problem with that personally, and that's another reason I can't belong to the Democratic Party. Speaking of that, by the way, did you know that married black people are about 3 times more likely to be Republicans than single black people? So if we simply get the marriage rate up, we automatically get more Republicans as an added benefit. That's a pretty good thing. Unfortunately, the problems don't stop there. There's some statistics out there that I can't ignore. The black murder rate is unfortunately much higher than the white murder rate by several times. Aggravated assault, carjacking, the rate of sexually transmitted diseases. I hate to say this, I don't want to have to say this, but they're much higher. It's a big problem, and it wasn't always this way. Many of these problems are new problems that have really skyrocketed since the war on poverty began. And many of these programs actually disincentivize family formation, stable families, and they incentivize the wrong kind of behavior. Things are so bad that about the same number of black people kill each other every year as September 11th. That's one September 11th every year worth of black people killing each other. Did you hear Obama talking about this? Did you hear Jesse Jackson? Did you see them doing marches, protesting? Did you see them sitting in front of the homes of gangsters that do this stuff and saying, we will not go anywhere until you stop the killing? Do you see them doing that? No. But they go on CNN and say, oh, there's a white rash. That's why Trump won. That's the best answer they have to a lot of this stuff. And that's another reason I can't belong to the Democratic Party. It seems that their strategy is to divide people into groups and then portray each group as a victim. Muslims, LGBT, you feel like a man today, you feel like a woman today, whatever your group is, and then they say that Christians, whites, and men, those are their big 3 targets, are guilty of oppressing those groups. That's their basic strategy, and I think that's very problematic and immoral. There's lots of other things I could go on and talk about, but there's 3 suggestions I have that I believe we can do to help to reach out more. 1, do not argue. If you're speaking with a black person as a Democrat, don't say, oh, the Democratic Party is a party of slavery and segregation. That's what history shows. That's true. But the people's mentality is such that they're not going to be convinced by that argument. So you can't really argue with people. It's not going to get you anywhere. How do you know if you're arguing? If you think you might be arguing, then you're arguing. Very simple. Second answer, be friends. Just be friends. Reach out, invite folks over to dinner, get to know their kids, have their kids know your kids. Just have a very good, warm, friendly relationship with people. That makes a difference. Then when they look at the ballot next time, they'll say, oh, I don't like Republicans much, but I know this guy named Norm Hughes and his family is great. They treat me really well. So maybe this Republican guy on this ballot is like Norm Hughes. And so then they'll consider maybe voting for that person. The personal relationship aspect makes a very big difference. The third thing is be present. In many of the poorest neighborhoods in Detroit, there are no grocery stores. So why can't there be a Republican grocery store? Why can't it make food for the families and help the people with meals and whatnot? Because a lot of the stores in those neighborhoods are extremely unhealthy. There's sausage places, fried food. That's all there is, and it contributes to really poor health for those people. So why can't there be a Republican grocery store in those neighborhoods to reach out to those people? So those are just a few things we can do, I think, to reach out better, which we want to be doing, and overcome the Democratic messaging that's out there. Then perhaps we can have more people here and more voters, which is a good thing. There's no downside to that on our side. That's it. Thank you very much.
Oh, no. Okay, great. Thanks. We got a great lunch program. My name's Rob Steele. I'll be hosting the lunch here. We've got Pastor Franzel up here and our featured speaker, Dr. Lee Edwards, who's come in from D.C. It's going to be great. But the first thing we're going to do, first, thank you, Norm, for putting this together. It's a ton of work. Some of you have put on similar meetings, Matt, out here, and you know how difficult it is. And I really got to thank all of you for being here. As I look around, there are people from the UP, there are people from the 1st Congressional District up north. I see people from Lenawee and Monroe County, down around Hillsdale, all around Grand Rapids. And you guys are the core leaders that will help drain the swamp and will help fight for the conservative issues that we need that need to be advanced to the future. Thank you all for being here. And now I'd like to introduce Pastor Franzel, who's been a great friend of this event. He's the pastor here for over 20 years at Capital City Baptist, and they've done their best to keep the kids educated from young ages on up through the older ages, and he has been a great friend of this event. Please welcome Pastor Franzel. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me say to Norm Hughes and all the distinguished guests that are here today, thank you for coming. We want you to feel like you're part of our fellowship here today, and if there's anything we can do to help you, we certainly want to do that. If you don't see it and you need it, ask. I probably can't give you an answer, but we have a very qualified staff that can take care of all your needs. We appreciate you coming. We stand for what you stand for. We preach what you stand for. In this community, everybody knows where we stand as a church and where I stand as a pastor. And it's important for us always to remember God and country. That's where we were raised, and that's what we need to do. But I'm not going to preach, so Norm's giving me the eye. I better get my prayer done and then get going here. So let's pray. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you, Lord, for the possibility and for the privilege we had to gather together. Like-minded people. Lord, we thank you for the friendship we have with MiCPAC and all those that are represented here. For Norm, and Lord, we appreciate his friendship. Lord, we certainly want to be pleasing to you. We want to be in the center of your perfect will for us, individually as citizens, as Christians, as a country, a nation that was created under you. Lord, we praise your name. And Lord, we pray you bless this time together, bless the food, bless the hands prepared. And we commit this now in your precious name. In the name of Jesus, amen.
Okay, we're going to go ahead with lunch, and obviously we want people to be efficient. We've got a great program for the rest of the lunchtime. We've got some videos. We're going to have some great comments from Dr. Edwards, and then we're going to have some more recognition after that. So let's go ahead and start maybe by rows of the table, and you guys go ahead and start up first, and when they're in line to kind of get going, please, next row, go ahead and follow behind, kind of keep track, but try to be efficient so that we can keep things going, and I'll be back in our seats and hear the great message from Dr. Edwards. Thanks very much.
AccessVision, your voice, your community.